Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Glow Blueprint, which is all about nourishing your nervous system. Now, this is a huge week. I would actually argue that this should be episode 1 because your nervous system really informs how everything else in your mind and your body and even your soul interact with each other. So, if you're dealing with chronic illness, if you want to improve your quality of life, and of course, glow from within, you really need to understand how the nervous system works. I understand that it's becoming a little bit more popular overall. The online discourse is very much growing. If you think about gut health, it's been a craze over the last few years. I definitely think that nervous system is the new gut health, and to be fair, it's a very new industry. I mean, all the research into nervous system regulation, trauma and PTSD management has only really come around in the last couple of decades. All of the pioneers in this industry, in this field of research, are still alive today, minus one, I think, which really tells you something. It's very much a new, like a novelty, and we're just learning about it. So you may be online hearing about, oh, you got to balance your nervous system, fight, flight, rest, digest. Oh, you've got to regulate your nervous system. And there's a lot of very general terms, but people don't really know what it means to regulate your nervous system. And today is going to teach you exactly that. And it's going to show you the link between your nervous system and trauma, the way you were raised, even generational trauma and, pre and postnatal, or even things that would have happened within your mother's pregnancy while you were in your womb. It's going to link gut health, which in previous episodes you already know, I've been alluding to the link between your gut health and your nervous system health, and overall just your experiences in life, your body's experiences, and how we deal with stress and the survival response. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, I am going to start off with a very big disclaimer. Today may be very triggering for you, especially if you have a history of dissociating, not being in body, being in chronic stress or a chronic fight flight state, if you've had childhood trauma, okay? Now, if you at any point in time feel like it's becoming overwhelming, maybe you notice yourself getting triggered, you start getting activated, you start feeling really overwhelmed, please take this at your own pace, pause, take breathers, connect with your body again. And I know it's kind of going to be active learning in that sense, where I'm teaching you how to connect with your body, and you might actually have to start practicing it whilst you're hearing it in real time. Ground yourself, feel your feet on the ground, get up from your desk or wherever you're sitting and go get some air, come back to it whenever you feel prepared. Because when you're presented with facts that really speak to you, really relate to you, yep, this is what I'm dealing with, it can be very confronting. So please do not force yourself through the content if you feel like you can't handle it, okay? And come back to it in your own time. Now, let's just talk about real quick, like why I even got into trauma study, why I got into this field of research. To be real with you, it just kept coming up with my clients. So, I'm a holistic health coach. I started off as just a PT, then I became an online coach, and I started, taking care of more complex clients. And this is where I noticed that there was a link between the really struggling clients that just couldn't get results, couldn't stay consistent. They had really damaged metabolisms, or they had a lot of chronic health problems and they couldn't lose weight, and they were just always tired all the time, and having a background of trauma. And I realized, okay, I need to go a level deeper. I need to obviously upskill and understand what's going on here so I can actually help these girls. A lot of these girls have had coaches in the past and they've been gaslit or disregarded or belittled. You're just not consistent enough. You're not adherent enough. You just need to take some deep breaths. Have you tried a meditation? Are you sleeping enough? Oh, you just need to keep at it. And I understand that's in good faith on the coach's part. They're just doing the best with what they've got. But it just goes to show that these girls need specialized help. And I was fascinated by it once I got into the study, and I found so much fulfillment as a coach because I'm actually able to help these girls and I'm able to connect the pieces. So that's where I got into it. It's very good to be trauma informed. It's good to be nervous system informed, but I just need you to know that I am not trauma trained. Okay. So if you want somebody who is trained in helping you with these areas and applying everything you're going to learn today, I highly recommend that you find a good somatic practitioner. If you don't know what that is, you will by the end of today. If you don't know where to look, if you don't know what a somatic practitioner is, I will definitely talk you through all of that. Okay. But this is meant to be educational. This is meant to be kind of like an introduction or like a starting pack. I'm going to give you the knowledge. I'm also going to give you tools that you can do on your own. But if you feel like you can't handle this on your own, if you feel like you can't take yourself through this, facilitated by me, of course, please reach out for help. Don't bite off more than you can chew because that can be very damaging and, in fact, re-traumatize you. Okay. And then I guess the last couple of points that I wanted to make is just around the link between trauma and the nervous system. You know, we think that trauma, as a society, we tend to associate trauma with mental health, you know, mind. It's the state of your brain, you know, it could be a chemical imbalance, or maybe I'm just so messed up, or, you know, I've got memory problems because of my trauma, and it's a lived experience in the mind. But I would actually say, and actually it's not even me that would say this, I think the general consensus in the nervous system community is that it is more of a physiological body problem and less a mental problem. So you would argue that the brain is an end organ, not in the control seat. Okay. It's not the brain is not actually causing this problem, or it's not the main organ that's responsible for what you're experiencing. It's more so a symptom of something deeper going on. And I can understand you probably think, okay, well, isn't the nervous system your brain? Yes, but that's only one of three major nervous systems in your body. And we'll talk about that in a few slides' time. So yeah, trauma is linked to a dysregulated nervous system, and that is mostly going to show up in the body. Okay. Another thing is that trauma is trauma. You know, I don't like playing the trauma Olympics, you know, like, oh, yeah, I had a mum who was just trying to do her best, but yeah, I'm a little bit traumatized. No big deal though. Honey, do not belittle your trauma. Trauma is trauma, and the worst experience you've ever had in your life is the worst experience you've ever had in your life. Don't compare it to someone who's come from a war-torn country or who's been sexually abused, because the way that our body handles trauma and feels it is the same, whether it's from a dog biting you, or a sport injury, or a neglectful, abusive parent. Okay, it is the same. And in fact, that's part of the reason why a lot of people don't realize that they're traumatized, because they look at their lived experiences and they grew up in a safe environment, you know, a friendly neighborhood, loving parents, they had friends, and yet they still display the classic signs of trauma, aka a dysregulated nervous system, and they don't know what it is. And then that's where you get into the whole, oh, maybe I just have anxiety and depression. Maybe it's just a chemical imbalance. Maybe I just need to go on an SSRI. Well, this content today is meant to help you see the facts behind it and help you understand that you can have trauma despite having loving parents and a good, healthy childhood, because we all deal with trauma in the same way, and trauma isn't on a magnitude, it isn't on a scale. Okay. And the last point I wanted to make in this disclaimer, which is a long one, I have to say, is that you don't have to talk about your trauma in order to heal it. And in fact, you actually don't oftentimes remember a lot of your trauma. And I'm sure a lot of people with trauma can understand and relate to that. Because trauma is a body problem, it's a nervous system problem, it is something that's experienced in the somatic environment or in the somatic body, you actually need to get down to the level of the body in order to start dealing with it. And that's actually why a lot of people with complex PTSD and childhood trauma go to, you know, therapists and psychologists, and they talk and talk and talk and talk, but there's no body work being done. And so it, if anything, puts them in a worse state, because they're just remembering all of these really hard memories and experiences, and they're not actually getting any better. They're just talking through it. And that's why a lot of people don't actually feel like they're getting much out of talk therapy. So today you will get those tools to start really getting into body and working at the level of the body rather than just being stuck in your mind all the time. Okay, so what is the nervous system? Your nervous system, I would argue, is you. It is your consciousness. It is your lived experience, every emotion that you feel, every sensation that you experience in the world, your cognition. It is the connection between your mind and your body, okay? And so that's why I would argue that it's you. It's your consciousness, right? And it controls all forms of movement, including the organs. So your heart contracting, your gut moving and processing all your food, obviously muscle contractions, all of that is linked and governed by the nervous system. So it allows us to switch states and go from being in body to out of body. You know how sometimes you'd be sitting in a boring lecture or a boring class and you're kind of zoning out, which I hope you're not doing right now. That is governed also by the nervous system. So you can actually tune in and out of your surroundings as well. Now, there's actually a few kinds or three different nervous systems we have, which a lot of people don't know. So I'll quickly run through them. You have the CNS, which is the central nervous system. That is the brain and the spinal cord, which is like the commanding center. So the CEO of the company. And that's what most people think the nervous system is. But we actually have a peripheral nervous system as well. So peripheral is just like outside. That's what the word kind of means. And so it is all of the end organs, all of the muscles, all of the tissue. So whenever you feel a burning sensation on your fingers, right, that is the peripheral nervous system, the nerves on the tips of your skin or the ends of your skin, picking up the signal and sending it to the center of command, the brain. And that is an example of the two nervous systems working together. And the third one is the enteric nervous system. Enteric is related to the gut, and the gut actually has a vast network of nerves. So it is responsible for obviously the gut functions that we think about all the time, but it's also responsible for, you know, your hormone production. It's talking to organs to make sure that you're getting enough neurotransmitters sent to your brain, because that's actually where a lot of your serotonin and your dopamine is created, in the gut. And the nervous system, again, is communicating and controlling the flow of all of these systems, okay? So that is the nervous system in a nutshell. And of course, last point is around survival. It is just as it is responsible for shifting states, okay, shifting your consciousness and your awareness, it's also responsible for shifting you from a stress response to a rest response, okay? So that survival response where, you know, suddenly you're upbeat, you're alert, your heart is pumping, you're ready to run out of danger or fight for survival, and the state where you're sleepy, you're relaxed, you're just chilling with your friends, that is the nervous system, okay? So it is so, so important, and that is why it is at the root of chronic health problems, because when you have a chronic health problem and your nervous system is not connecting the mind and the body, it's not connecting all of these different systems, you get problems, okay? And so when we talk about a dysregulated nervous system, as I already spoke about, it is at the root of trauma and PTSD. I would also argue it's at the root of your chronic health problems as well, okay? Now, specifically when it comes to development of the nervous system, we have to look at what happens in early childhood, specifically around the age of like 0 to 5 years old, or even in utero, like I alluded to earlier. Because just like everything else really in the body, the nervous system is something that develops in early childhood. So this is where a lot of problems can happen, because a lot of people don't end up with a fully developed and nourished and innovated and attuned nervous system because of things that happen in their childhood and early development, okay? And that messes up the way that we experience life. It messes up the way that we function, and it definitely does lead to chronic health problems in the future. And that is because before the age of 5, we are obviously developing a nervous system, but also we are experiencing the world through the somatic body and less through the mind. So we don't actually have many explicit memories before the age of 5, if you think about it. But our bodies have a lot of memories. And so when we talk about the somatic body, this is a word that's going to come up a lot today, so please pay attention to this definition. It is the physical experience but from within. So think about sensations, think about movement patterns, emotions. They are all experienced in the body. Okay. So it could be, a certain reaction in response to um, a stimulus. Like if I think about something that happens before the age of 5, you fall down the stairs. That's a very common experience. You're not going to remember it, but your body might get really, really tight when it starts to interact with stairs because it has this fear, or it could be, a certain toy that you really, really love. And interacting and playing with that toy means or leads to your body, your somatic body, experiencing a flow state, more oxygen, your muscles want to move in a certain way, okay? This is how you interact with the world before the age of 5. It's through the somatic body, and it's how it also interacts with the environment, okay? Now, when there are problems in childhood, when there are traumatic events in the childhood, they don't actually get remembered, but they stay stored in the body. And this is what we call survival stress. Okay. So if I think about falling down the stairs, right, as a child, it's a very common thing. And if you don't learn how to integrate that because you didn't get a developed nervous system, you weren't taught how to regulate from your primary caregivers. So your parents didn't teach you this. Okay. You end up storing a lot of this survival stress, storing this these somatic experiences, these movement patterns, these fears, okay, that express themselves in, hyperventilation, racing heart rate, tense shoulders, however it is that your body expresses this emotion. If it's not integrated, if it's not dealt with in the moment, if it's not processed, you end up with dysregulation, okay? And this is a disconnection between the nervous system, between the mind and the body, okay? So if I were to define what self-regulation is, it's pretty much making sure that you are dealing with a stressor in the moment. So you're not just brushing it off to the side. You're not ignoring it. You're letting this emotion express itself in the body. You're letting these movement patterns work through the body so that you can integrate it with your lived experience and you can push it through the body. I know that that might sound a little bit woo-woo. I understand. First time I heard this, I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Or you will by the end of today. So this is literally just a high level overview. We're going to get into the nitty gritty so that you understand this fully. Okay. But a dysregulated nervous system is all about a lack of integration. There's too much stored survival stress from events that happen in life, and you're not integrating it in your body. You're not letting it move through the body, through the system, through the somatic experience. You're stuffing it down and you're suppressing it, and that causes a dysregulated nervous system. So let's start from the beginning. Okay, let's start from the body. Okay, the body is the origin of emotion. And I think this is actually a huge misconception we have as a society. We think that emotion is experienced in the mind, which is definitely true, but it is felt within the body. So you may have seen this image before. It is pretty much a heat map that shows what parts of the body are activated and working when you're experiencing different emotions. So happiness is felt all over the body, pride is felt, higher up in the body. Now, I wouldn't say this is 100% accurate. I think that every emotion is felt differently by different people. We all experience anxiety in different ways to different intensities. So don't take this as, Bible, take it with a grain of salt. But I like that this shows you just how active the body is when it comes to experiencing and expressing emotions. So the first thing that you need to understand is emotion is driven, governed, felt by the somatic body. It is the origin of emotion. Yes, the mind is involved because, like I mentioned earlier, the brain is an end organ. So you are going to get symptoms in the brain and in the head. And the nervous system is communicating, it's connecting the two, it's connecting everything happening in the body and sending that message or those signals to the brain to process it, right? Okay. Now, this is the issue we have as a society, especially in Western cultures. We retreat from emotional pain as we do physical pain, okay? And as such, people miss the cues that their bodies give them when they're triggered, when they're upset, when something bad happens, okay? So we have to come back to the most fundamentals when it comes to healing and regulating the nervous system. Do you feel your emotions? Do you even know how to sit with feelings, even in discomfort? Okay. Do you know what sadness manifests as in your body? Do you know where you feel it? And the thing about emotions is it's a very non-verbal language. Okay. So when you say, I feel anxiety, people have a general idea of what that means for you. But I would argue that you need to get deeper and actually verbalize a non-verbal experience. Where does anxiety take you? What are you feeling? Which parts of your body are feeling it and how? Okay. Emotions and the experience of your emotions is step one to healing your nervous system. It is going to be the like 99% of the work that you're going to have to do is sitting with discomfort or uncomfortable feelings. It's not retreating from emotional pain, but rather integrating it with your body, not suppressing it, disconnecting from it, not wanting to bring it into your awareness and just distracting yourself or dissociating. No, it's integrating the two. Okay. That is the most important work that you're ever going to have to do in your life. And it goes against a lot of the things that we're taught in society. But it's also why we're seeing so much chronic health problems, so many issues as a society, so much dysregulation in the nervous system, a lot more than other countries that are really going through it, because Western culture takes pride in the fact that we just sweep things under the rug, we put on a brave face, and we move on in life. Okay. So that is the number one thing you need to understand. And we're going to elaborate a lot more on that today. But I just wanted to really bring this point home by saying that if you suppress and ignore your emotions and you don't experience them, there is a big danger of you experiencing chronic health problems. And there are studies now to show this and support this. There's something called the ACE study. So it's the Adverse Childhood Events or Experiences study. Yeah, Adverse Child Experiences study. And it ran in the late 90s, like 95, 96, something like that. And it basically confirmed what nervous system practitioners and a lot of us already knew, which is that when you have adverse childhood experiences, so, traumatic experiences in early childhood, that leads to a wide range of negative health outcomes later in life. Okay. So they looked at things like chronic disease, cancer, diabetes, autoimmune problems, fibromyalgia. And there was a strong correlation between adults presenting with these chronic health conditions and having adverse childhood experiences. Okay. And even this book, The Body Keeps the Score, this book literally came out in like the 2010s. I think it's been about 10 years only. And it was so revolutionary. You've probably heard of it. If you haven't, I highly recommend picking it up. Bess Wenderkolk, he basically connected the dots and said, hey, when you suppress your emotions and you have all this survival stress stuck inside that you're not integrating, you're not processing, then it ends up getting trapped in the body. It's like an unresolved or an unreleased trauma that is not able to express itself. So it gets trapped in the body, trapped in the somatic body, which is what we call somatic memory. And it ends up leading to a bunch of different problems. Okay. And the reason why is because these traumatic experiences are felt by the body, experienced by the body, and they get encoded. They get encoded in muscle patterns, muscle tension, posture, even visceral sensation. So visceral means organs, So, you might always feel like the upper left quadrant of your stomach being really, really tight. That could mean that there's a specific organ that is holding onto this tension. Chronic back pain, chronic migraines, a tight shoulder could be linked to a stored somatic memory that didn't get the chance to play out, didn't get the chance to integrate, and it got stuck there. Okay. So let's talk about how trauma is actually remembered. This is going to make a lot more sense. And it's going to really bring all the points that I've been speaking about together. All right. We have two types of memories. We have explicit memories and implicit. So explicit or declarative memories are the specific events or the specific, I guess, details of an event. So, for example, I'm going to a picnic and it's a beautiful day. The weather's lovely. The flowers are in bloom. It's springtime. We're eating cheese. We're eating jam. It's a lovely day. These are all your explicit memories, okay? Then we have our implicit memories, which are procedural memories. And these are more so the somatic experiences. So let's say that in this picnic or on this picnic, a dog came out of nowhere and launched itself at me. And before I got the chance to get out of the way, before I got the chance to lift my arms up in self-defense, this dog came and took a big chunk out of my shoulder. Okay. Big bite. That event, dog bit me, is the explicit or the declarative memory. But the procedural memory behind it is the shock. I wanted to lift my arms up, but I didn't get the chance to, okay, before that dog came for the attack. I wanted to run and get out of danger, but I didn't get the chance to, okay? Those are the procedural memories. Now, this is the thing. If you don't process that event after it occurs, if you don't give yourself the chance to sit with those procedural memories and actually play them out or act them out, the instructions from my brain to the muscles in my arm and shoulders to lift my arms up to protect myself are still going to try and complete that action inside of my body. And so that's where you end up with a tight shoulder, where you can't complete full ranges of motion because your nervous system is sending all these signals to your muscles to contract, contract, contract. And so they get tight over time, and so you may notice that, and this is very, very individual. You may notice that after a traumatic event has happened to you, and yes, a dog bite or anything even as simple as, hitting your hip on the side of or corner of a table is a shock trauma. Okay. Remember, trauma is trauma. It's felt and experienced in the same way. Let's not belittle them. If you don't actually process the way that your body wanted to protect yourself in that moment, if you don't let out a big scream, if you don't, let out a shake sometimes, if you don't let out the movement patterns that your body wanted to perform, they are going to get trapped, and your body or your mind or your nervous system is still going to send these signals over and over and over again. So what you need to do is you need to complete that act in a safe way to deactivate that signal being sent. Okay. And so this is what we say, or what we mean when we talk about somatic memory. Okay. It's talking about these procedural memories. Okay. And healing trauma is all about tapping into them, tapping into all of the encoded movement patterns and tension and signals being sent to all these different muscles. Okay. It's all about getting you and getting your body to perform a protective movement pattern or a posture or a movement in general that is there to protect you, that you didn't get to express in the moment when you were being traumatized or when the event happened. Okay. Now, it's very specific to the event. So I wouldn't necessarily say healing trauma is about shaking it out, just shaking it out and let out a big scream, because it depends, right? And as we go through the slides today, you'll get more of an intimate understanding of what I mean. But the release of the trauma has to be directly linked to the event itself. Okay. You can't just shake it out or cry it out if the event had nothing to do with that, so hopefully this segment so far has started to really land and starting to make sense, and you're starting to realize how and why trauma is something that is linked to your body. Okay. Now, before we move into more of the nervous system physiology, I just wanted to talk about the different types of trauma. Okay, so we've spoken about shock trauma, and this is where, something happens out of the blue, the body gets hurt, and we recover from it. And we all have experiences like that in life. They can be physical, they can be sexual, they can even be verbal assault. It could be something like my house burnt down, or I got into a car accident, environmental things. Then we have accumulated stress, and this is also an incredibly common one. So think about the corporate, capitalist lifestyle, the 9 to 5, they've got bills to pay, I've got a family to take care of. I'm not getting enough sleep, not enough downtime. I'm not connecting enough with other people. That can really build up, and it can dysregulate your nervous system, as I'm sure you know. Medical, and I would call this like unconscious trauma, so things that happened to you while you were unconscious. So think about being in surgery, especially one that came out of nowhere, like, oh, I suddenly got appendicitis, or suddenly my tonsils were removed, or they had to set a bone. A near-death experience is another one. Being knocked unconscious during sport, or even date rape. Date rape is another big one. Even doctors who are unprofessional, like medical trauma is real. Let's admit it. Hey. Lastly, early and developmental trauma. So this happens in utero. It happens under the age of 5, like we spoke about. It can even happen before you're even conceived, depending on what's happening with the mother, what's happening with the father and the sperm that he gives. It can happen to your mother while she's pregnant with you, and then that can then affect you. Birth as well, birth trauma. So being removed from your mom, very medicalized. You're taken away and put in a nursery with other babies instead of actually connecting with your mother. Being stuck in the birth canal, not breathing for a particular amount of time before you are officially out of the birth canal. Being born prematurely, being in an incubator, being hooked up to all these machines, being sick and having surgery whilst you're still a newborn, choking is an early and developmental trauma. And then, of course, we have the physical neglect, being in an unhealthy environment, being poorly fed, being sexually abused as a young child. These are all different forms. And to recap some of the things that we've spoken about, and I hope that you now understand, here are, I would say, the big 4 misconceptions about trauma. So the first one is that trauma is a psychological problem rather than a physiological one. It's actually the other way around, okay? It's more so something that's experienced by the body and less by the mind. Not to say that you're not experiencing in the mind at all. It's just that's where you're processing everything happening in your body, right? Talking about your trauma can fix it. Actually, it can more often than not re-traumatize the person. If you don't have the ability to handle it, if you don't know how to sit with hard and really uncomfortable feelings, and then you get this huge reminder, a big wave of emotions as you begin to open up and talk about things that you may have repressed or suppressed from a young age, it can actually re-traumatize you. It can be so distressing that, your nervous system doesn't know how to cope, and so it shuts down, Number 3, the person is aware or remembers the trauma. Well, as we've spoken about, trauma is actually more encoded and remembered by the somatic body. So you may have encoded movement patterns. You may have encoded pain and tension in certain muscles and organs, and you may not have any memory of where that came from and why it started. And so that's why we need to get to the level of the body. And you may not, even as you're releasing that trauma, you may not even know why your arm wants to move in a certain way, why you feel the need to move in a certain way. But just know that you're actually getting out the stress energy that was stored by the body, even if the mind has no memory of it. And that is because the way that we experience life in early childhood is through the somatic body. We do not have many explicit or declarative memories before the age of 5. And then lastly, trauma is always a horrible or terrible event. Well, the thing is, trauma is actually not about the event itself, but rather how the body experiences it. And that's why I said trauma is trauma. We all process it in the same way. And it can happen from something very quote unquote harmless. You might think it's no big deal, but it could be very insidious. It could be very, very traumatic without actually realizing it. And we'll go through an example or 2 later on today just to drive that point home. It doesn't have to be something that's so obvious. It could happen right in front of your eyes, and you seeing it happen to someone and you maybe making a joke out of it, maybe laughing it off, maybe not even realizing that it's happening, but that person is literally being traumatized in front of your own eyes. So moving on. This next part of today's video is going to be very physiological, very science dense, and I understand that at any moment in time, you may feel a little bit overwhelmed by the jargon. You may feel like it's a little bit beyond your reach, and I could dumb it down for you, but I'm not going to, because you're intelligent. and you're more than capable of understanding this. I'm going to explain it in a way that's understandable, but I'm not going to dumb it down. I think that in order to truly heal your nervous system, you need to understand how it works. You need to understand how it works on an intimate level, okay? I think that we're all adults here. We're all capable of learning, and you should give yourself some credit, even if you don't come from a scientific background like I do, even if it doesn't land as fast. That's fine. I just think that in order to heal, you need to have the knowledge. And in order to have the knowledge, you need to become a master apprentice of your own stress physiology, and you need to have the language for it. You need to have the language for it. And that's why this jargon is really important. Okay. So again, take it at your own pace, pause, take down notes, rewind if you need to, but I am not holding back on the scientific terms for it. Okay. But you will definitely learn everything you need to become a master of your own body, of your own nervous system, okay? All right, let's start with the basics, okay? I'm sure we've all heard of fight, flight, rest, digest. This is a very simplified overview of what the nervous system does. The nervous system is a lot more than just this, but we've probably heard about this in high school and learned about it at uni. So it's worth talking about. So this is basically about stress and safety. It's the stress response or the survival response. So we have two branches of the nervous system. We have the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic. Sympathetic is all about getting you excited, activated, prepared to fight or flight, okay? So what that manifests as is your brain and spine are going to send signals to your pupils to dilate. When they dilate, they get bigger, okay? And that means that you can see more, especially at nighttime, okay? And that'll help you see the danger around you and get out as quickly and as efficiently as you can. It'll increase your heartbeat, so that way you're getting more oxygen to your body, and that way your muscles can contract faster. It's going to relax your airways again for more oxygen. It's going to stop any gut activity that's unnecessary. I'm sorry, but the food you ate an hour ago is not as important to spend energy on processing than getting out of the way of the saber-toothed tiger coming at you, right? So that's why a lot of people who are living in chronic fight flight have gut problems, because you're not actually digesting your food. It's just sitting there. It stimulates glucose release so that you can get a constant stream of energy. It releases adrenaline to get you pumped, really, really excited. And prepared to fight your way through. And it also actually promotes ejaculation and vaginal contractions. So it is just part of the sympathetic nervous system. It's all about excitation. Because if you think about being sexually aroused, a lot of this stuff happens anyway, increased heart rate, glucose release, adrenaline release, and so that's why a lot of people, when they are very stressed or they're in a very bad situation, they get a little horny, and they can also experience a bit of incontinence, or they might feel like they need to piss their pants, like when you're about to go on stage to say a speech and then you feel like you need to pee. That's also because of the sympathetic chain of the nervous system. Now, the parasympathetic, the way I like to remember it is sympathetic is coming up, para, like a parachute coming down. Just a nice little mnemonic to help you remember. The parasympathetic nervous system is all about bringing you down from that activated state. So it's going to shrink your pupils. I don't need to see as much. Slow your heart rate down, slow down your lungs. It's going to stimulate the gut. It's going to chill on releasing glucose. And it is also going to stimulate sexual arousal. Now, the nervous system is a lot more than just these. Okay, we'll talk about that in the coming slides, but I think it's still important to understand how the stress response or the survival response manifests, okay? And how you need to have a regulated nervous system in order to effectively switch between the two, okay? We don't want to be here too much. In fact, humans were not designed to be sympathetically activated all the time. We're designed for acute bouts of stress. So quick, short, intense, but not a low level chronic state of stress. It's very insidious. It wears about the system. It's a highly costly state of being in. Okay, we want to make sure that we are spending enough time in parasympathetic mode or rest digest mode. Okay. And it also can mess up, our cortisol which is our stress hormone levels. It can mess up our melatonin, which is on the next slide. So our melatonin is the hormone responsible for making us sleepy, and cortisol is responsible for making us feel alert. And when we have a healthy, regulated nervous system, this is the way it should look. So melatonin should be high at night and low in the daytime, and cortisol should be low at night and high in the daytime, okay? And what we see with a lot of people who are, chronically activated in that sympathetic fight-flight state is they end up with adrenal fatigue. Their adrenal glands are just pumping out too much cortisol. And then when you have too much cortisol, your body can't make enough melatonin because they have this inverse relationship. When one goes up, the other comes down, and vice versa. And so having a dysregulated circadian rhythm is also governed by the nervous system. Now, it's a little bit more complex than just that. So we're going to take it a step further and talk about how dysregulation happens. So this is a nice summary of the stress response. And I got this from Irene Lyon, who is a goat in the nervous system space. I learned majority of what I know from her. And if you want to learn more about this stuff, I highly recommend going to her YouTube. She has heaps of videos on YouTube that explain it all. And she also has a course, and she's a great person to follow online. She's very well connected, and just had to give her a shout out. And she also has really, really good diagrams like this. So trauma happens, okay? So dad leaves, injury, my house burns down, okay? That impacts the nervous system. How does it impact the nervous system? It activates the survival mechanisms. So fight and flight. And there's also freeze, which we're going to talk about. These are all different kinds of survival responses, okay? I'm either going to try to fight it. If I can't fight it, I'm going to run away. If I can't run away, I'm stuck there. I'm going to shut down. I'm going to freeze. I'm going to disconnect because it's such a distressing experience that I don't want to experience it. I don't want to go through it. And that's where we see, personality disorders like split personality come out, because you compartmentalize and you don't want to go through that. And so you disconnect and you switch into another personality. Now, the issue here is as humans, we get stuck. We get stuck in this state if we do not process it, if we do not integrate all of these procedural memories and push them through the system, okay? So when we get stuck, we're in dysregulation. And in order to regulate and heal the nervous system so we can access healing, so we can get flow back, so we can, make sure that we're actually processing all of this emotion, all of this survival stress, we need to unstuck ourselves or unstick ourselves. We need to get out of this state, okay? Now, the issue as a human being is it's very hard to do that because we were designed to get stuck in here. And I'll explain this by actually using David Attenborough's documentaries as a good example. So animals do not get stuck in this peak arousal state, okay? I don't know if you've ever seen videos of like an antelope running away from a lion, okay? What happens when the antelope sees the lion coming at it full force, full speed? The stress enters, right? So the physiology goes up, and then they are in peak arousal. Now, if you pay attention to these documentaries, these like wildlife observations, you'll see something happen every single time when the prey gets out of danger and they survive. They release this really, really spastic shake. Like they start spasming for what, 10 seconds, 30 seconds? And then as soon as they've done that, they come back down to resting baseline, okay? Animals do this. Animals do this as a form of integration. They have a lot of stress energy that they've just experienced and it's stuck in the system. They need to get it out. So how do you get it out? Big, big, big shake. Okay. And it's actually really fascinating. And it just really highlights the way the nervous system works. Okay. In fact, I don't think animals can experience PTSD in that sense, in the way that humans do. They literally get it out immediately. It's like inbuilt in their system. So they get this shakeout and then they come straight down. Unfortunately, humans are not the same. we do not have this automated process to, get all the stress energy out. We actually have to actively, consciously integrate it, okay, or get that out. So we can get stuck. And I think this is the key to regulating your nervous system, is making sure that you actually process it so that you don't end up getting stuck. And obviously there's evolutionary reasons why this even happens. Like, you might think, okay, why weren't we just created to shake it out the way animals do? Well, I think we're a lot more complex, cognitively speaking. We are, a lot more aware. We can ruminate. We're also very wired to think about the negatives, because it is a survival benefit or advantage to always preempt negative. There are obviously other factors like social and environmental factors. Emotional processing is completely different. We have different coping mechanisms, and we're just more evolved humans. And I think that's the main, or more evolved mammals. I think that's the main reason why it's not so simple for us. So now that you know the brief overview of the survival response, we now need to go a layer deeper. And this is where we're going to talk more about misattunement that happens in early childhood that can mess up your nervous system. We're going to talk about the freeze response a lot more, and just how bad and damaging it can be. And it's all to do with the vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve is very new in the industry. It only really came out, or we only really learned about it in the last 20 or so years. If you haven't heard about it, it's a nerve that starts, or it's located at the back of your vocal cords, and it also innervates or connects like the inner ear, parts of the face, okay? And it travels all through the body. So vagus actually means to wander. It's a wandering nerve, okay? It innervates below the diaphragm, including the gut. It also innervates the heart. And if you ever wonder what innervate means supplies nerves to, so that it can actually fire and connect and communicate with different organs and tissue. Okay. Now, the vagus nerve is very crucial to helping you digest your food. Okay. And it is, I would say, the most important part of activating rest digest. So if you struggle to digest your food and you have nervous system problems, it's most likely linked to the vagus nerve, okay? And just a fun fact, you can actually strengthen your vagus nerve like a muscle by eating bitter foods like apple cider vinegar, sauerkraut, singing, humming, gargling. Not to say that, I'm going to tell you to start humming just to, heal your vagus nerve. It's a lot more complex than that. But it also makes sense why, when you sing or you soothe a baby, you coo them, go, shh, or you sing to them softly, it's actually helping to stimulate the vagus nerve and help to relax the body. Okay. Now, we've spoken about the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight and flight response, and how it innervates different muscles and how it dilates your pupils, it, activates your heart. Now let's talk about the different branches of the parasympathetic nervous system. It's a lot more than just rest digest. There's actually three main branches of the parasympathetic nervous system. So we're going to go through them. Don't get overwhelmed by this slide. We're going to break it down. So let's just focus on this blue side here, which is the parasympathetic. So this is the vagus nerve. Let's just isolate that. We have the ventral, or the top part of the vagus nerve, and then the dorsal, or the bottom part of the vagus nerve, okay? The ventral part of the vagus nerve is the first area we're going to look at, which is the prosocial branch, okay? So the prosocial state, when our ventral vagus nerve is active, is what allows us to engage and interact with other people and basically help us socialize. And this is called the social engagement system. So it helps us to detect threats and to detect safety when we're engaging with others. So when we're in this ventral or top vagal state, we feel calm, we feel connected, we feel safe, but we also can assess our our surroundings, we can assess other people, and we can tell whether they are safe or dangerous to be around. Okay. So we can interact with others in a healthy way. And we do this by analyzing things like their eye contact, facial expressions, body language, vocalization. You can really tell when someone is being cold versus when they're being friendly. Yeah. And that's part of your social engagement system. And the vagus nerve is responsible. A healthy, developed vagus nerve is responsible for activating this part of the system. And it also is responsible for helping us react differently. So if we notice something's off, we start to change our demeanor with a person, with an animal, in a certain environment, so that we can start to feel safe. Okay. So for example, let's say that you saw somebody on the side of the road and they tripped. Okay. You're going to approach them because, we are evolved mammals and we are going to try to help them. Okay. So that's part of the social engagement system. We're going to engage socially with them. Now, this is the most advanced system, the most evolved system. So other animals do not have this. Okay. So we're going to go up to them. Hey, are you okay? Do you need any help? I'm not here to hurt you. I'm just here to help. And we're going to start reading the cues that we get from them. Now, this is what we call neuroception. So neuro is related to the nervous system, and ception is perception. Okay, so how we're viewing it. So we are viewing this situation in a very neuroceptive way, governed by the vagus nerve. Okay, so let's say that the person is a bit belligerent, they're getting a little bit antsy, the situation escalates. We're then going to move into the second level of this stress response, okay? Or I guess we could say this is the first level of the stress response, because first we were calm, first we were engaging socially, then we move into a stress response, okay? We're going to fight or flight. So either I got to run, I got to get out of here, okay? So let's say that for whatever reason, this person is really damn fast. They get up and they start chasing after us. Let's say this person catches up with you and throws you to the ground and wrestles you on the ground, okay? And you realize, yo, I can't fight this person. I literally am stuck on the floor. They pinned my arms to the ground and they're about to attack me or hurt me in some way. We're going to move into the third response, which is the most primitive thing that we can do. It's a very old system. It's very ingrained within us, okay? And that is to freeze or shut down, okay? This is no longer part of the social engagement system. We're going to start off in the social engagement system, which is step one or stage one. And then we're going to go through our options of survival in a very hierarchical order, okay? And this is what we call the phylogenetic reality. So we're going to go through a hierarchy of responses depending on how mature we are as animals. So most animals are going to go straight into fight flight, or they're not going to engage at all, right? We're going to go in a specific order. Now, to be fair, we don't have to do it in this order. It really just depends on what we need. So the system will default to what it needs depending on the situation. So if I were to give you an example, let's say that a mother's standing in the kitchen and all of a sudden she's not hearing her little baby, right? And when a baby's gone quiet for too long, it's a problem. So she looks around looking for her baby, and lo and behold, her baby's standing with a knife in its hand. And what's she going to do? Is she going to run straight to him and grab the knife? Possibly, but that would be a very dangerous option because the baby could get startled and hurt themselves. Now, yes, you could also try to engage with them. Hey, honey, can you put the knife down? Or the most likely thing that's going to happen is the mom's going to freeze. She's going to try to be as calm as possible, and she's going to approach slowly, and she's going to get the knife out of the baby's hand. This is an example of how evolved we are, and we're going to explore our options in this phylogenetic reality to make sure that we respond to the situation in the best way possible. Okay, so the issue is when you do not develop this social engagement system, this healthy neuroception, things become a bit wonky, okay? And this is because our social engagement system, the ventral branch of the vagus nerve, develops in the first 6 months of life. Like it starts developing about 6 months old and continues to develop all throughout childhood. Now, if you do not learn this as a child because you were in a really unsafe environment, an unhealthy environment, you weren't taught how to have boundaries, you weren't taught how to interact with people, you were neglected for whatever reason, your social engagement system never becomes developed, which means that as you go through life, you end up with an underdeveloped nervous system, wonky neuroception, and you don't know how to engage with people in a healthy way. You don't know how to read faces and body language, and you don't know how to pick up on cues. And so a lot of people with early developmental trauma who have an underdeveloped social engagement system actually cannot read the room in a healthy way, to put it frank. They misread the cues that people give them. They tend to end up in unsafe situations without picking up on cues that you would think are obvious. So you might think that person or that friend, and I'm sure we all know them, or maybe you are this person and you've picked up on this theme or pattern in your life. Somebody who just always ends up in trouble, is always in a bad situation, has bad gut feelings, a poor intuition. It's actually backed by science, and it's actually not their fault. It is because they have an underdeveloped social engagement system, an underdeveloped vagus nerve, you could argue, and they don't know how to read the cues of safety and danger. And they tend to be very socially awkward, or they tend to be very activated in social settings. So it's not just a bit of social anxiety. It's, I feel like I'm in danger. Someone is presenting as very calm and friendly towards me, but I'm observing it. I'm perceiving it with my neuroception as, oh, this person wants to attack. This person's going to hurt me. And so I'm in an activated state. Or I end up in situations that could have been easily avoided simply because I couldn't pick up on the dangers of it. People with early childhood trauma, a poor social engagement system, tend not to trust themselves, tend to have poor intuition. That bad gut feeling isn't right. Their gut feelings are not tuned correctly, and that is because of everything that we're talking about here. Okay, and so as adults, if you do not have this developed pro-social engagement system, you need to actually go back and re-nurture yourself. You need to myelinate nerves that never developed in the first place. So myelinate just means how can I explain this? It's basically your nerves are coated by a layer of fat called myelin, and it helps to send signals fast. It helps to speed up the signals passing through. It's kind of like insulation that helps things move quickly so that things can fire, or nerves can fire. Okay, so when we say a nerve hasn't been myelinated, it's slow to fire. It hasn't been developed healthily in a good way. And so we need to make sure as adults we go back and actually do the work that was never done as a child. You need to parent yourself in a sense. And you need to learn how to develop a healthy system of engagement with others. And that's why having a good social network is so important, a good support system. You need to go out and interact with the world. You need to develop a good gut health, a good gut feeling. You need to develop your neuroception. And the work that you're going to be learning how to do today is going to help you develop this. Moving on, let's talk about the next branch of the parasympathetic nervous system, or the vagus nerve, and that is the dorsal branch, okay? So the dorsal branch is all about calm, low activation, and minimal activity, I guess you could say. Now, this can be a good or a bad thing, because we have two different states that our dorsal vagus nerve can be in. It can be in low tone, which is rest digest, or it can be in high tone, which is freeze, alert, shut down. Okay. So they, funnily enough, present very similarly when you look at a person. You can be like, oh yeah, that person's pretty calm. Okay. But the difference can be day and night. That person can be quite literally in a survival response, or person can be resting, rejuvenating, healing. And so even though you may be presenting in the same way, two completely different things can be going on. And so a lot of people who, are in this chronic freeze shutdown response, they find a lot of soothing in things that actually numb them out. And we'll talk about that later on. But things like, a cold plunge, someone who's used to being in this shutdown response might get a lot of value, a lot of soothing out of going into a body of really cold water, or getting this big shock that helps to reinforce this shutdown. But what's really happening is you're not soothing yourself as much as you are numbing yourself out. And so even though you've calmed everything down, that doesn't mean you're in rest digest, honey. That means you're probably in freeze. Okay. So they present the same, completely different though. All right, so when we talk about low tone, dorsal vagus, okay, I know it's a big chunk of words, but low tone is all about calm reparation of the body, okay? It's true healing, and we need to spend a big chunk of our lives here. It's good for us. We need it to heal and regenerate muscle tissue, to detoxify organs, to make sure that all of the damage that's occurring to us over time is actually being repaired. And that's why when you don't have enough time, we're not spending enough time in rest digest, you end up with the chronic health issues I'm talking about because you're stuck in freeze. Okay. You're not spending enough time in pro-social state because it's underdeveloped. You're not spending enough time in rest digest. You're in freeze. You're in the survival response. When is your body going to get the time or the chance to heal itself? Right. Now let's talk about high tone. High tone is actually a good thing. We do need it at times to shut down and prepare for death. Okay. So if I go back to the example of, somebody pinning you down and they're about to attack you, you can't fight, you can't flight. What's the next option? You're going to freeze. It's a good thing. It's your body did a good thing by helping you shut down and dissociate from your body, because otherwise it would have just been too distressing to experience. And it's also good as a hibernation tactic almost. So your metabolism will go down. Blood flow is going to be concentrated to the core organs. You're going to save as much energy as possible because your body doesn't know when it's going to get food again. So a lot of people who are in, really hard situations, literally a matter of life or death, they go into this hibernation mode. Even other animals do, like dive mammals. Think about dolphins and whales. They are mammals, they need oxygen, but they have a very primitive nervous system where they are mostly in freeze. They're mostly in this shutdown response, in this dorsal vagal state. And that helps them survive with very low oxygen when they're in these deep waters for long periods of time. Okay. So it's good for them to be in this state for a long time, not good for humans. Okay. We just need it when we need to preserve and protect, but we shouldn't spend too much time here. And so what ends up happening, again, as a child specifically, is if you are in this chronic, dangerous state, you are stuck in this high tone dorsal state. And it's very difficult for you to shift. Okay. When you're in the state, you can't access the pro-social branch. You can't access rest digest. And so you are going to start to misread neutral faces and see fearful ones or dangerous ones. You're going to give off aggressive signals to others. You're going to come across as being very, very aggressive or fearful or anxious. And this is not a voluntary response, it is a sign that something is going on. This is a sign that you have been stuck in this freeze state for too long. Your brain hasn't been able to find safety. Okay. And so, like I said earlier, we need to re-nurture, or sometimes we need to nurture for the first time so that we can get this new nervous system plasticity happening. So we can develop a good social engagement system. So we can regulate our nervous system and switch between different states. Okay. The vagus nerve is all about slowing down, and we need to slow down. We can't always be in fight flight, but we also need to make sure that we are slowing down in a healthy way and not just shutting down. Okay. And the good thing is we can do this as adults. A lot of people think, oh, I'm messed up from childhood, I'm never going to be normal. I understand that, but I think it is also a cop out. And I think that a lot of people do this because they don't have better access to information. And this video that you're listening and watching now is supposed to educate you so that you no longer have a reason to believe that you're stuck like this. Our brains are very plastic. If you think about what plastic means very malleable, very durable. It can move and it can shift into different forms. And our nerves are very plastic as well. They can develop all the way until late adulthood. Okay. It's not like as soon as your development in childhood and adolescence is over, that's it, you're done, you're never going to change. That's not true. There's so much research to show how plastic our nervous systems are. They can innovate new tissue, they can myelinate when they haven't been myelinated before. Okay. They can develop new neural circuits and networks. So you can actually develop something that wasn't taught to you in childhood or that wasn't developed. The sooner you learn this, the sooner you learn how to get out of freeze, and we're going to talk about that later today, and move into rest digest, move into social, pro-social, you will heal your chronic health issues. Because when you're in rest digest, you actually can heal, right? This is the vagus nerve in a nutshell, okay? This is probably the most science dense we're going to get today. So if you've gotten through this, amazing. If you've understood it, you're ahead of the curve. Like 99% of people do not know what you now know, okay? And understanding how the vagus nerve manifests and dysfunction in the vagus nerve, how it manifests, means that you will start to become so much more aware of your body. You'll become a lot more informed in how you deal with your body and how you deal with these situations and triggers. I wanted to end on this point about vagus dysfunction and how it can manifest. So an overactive vagus nerve is when you are in too much freeze. Okay. So this is when it's too activated, specifically the high tone dorsal branch. So this is where you can be very, very sensitive to stimuli. So certain noises, bright lights, crowds, shopping centers, this is where you get a lot of dissociation and a lot of shutdown responses. Every time you're really stressed or even something minor that bothers you, you go into this immediate shutdown because your body is just so used to being here, right? Passing out and blacking out is another one, especially when panic attacks come on. So every time you get this big dose of emotional energy, a big dose of sympathetic fight flight energy, you don't know how to deal with it. Your vagus nerve takes over and goes straight into shutdown. Okay. And passing out makes sense because the vagus nerve innervates and controls the heart rate. So it can slow the heart. It can slow the diaphragm to slow your breathing. It can cause nausea and vomiting. And of course, as we spoke about, it causes you to struggle with connection because you associate this arousal with being very, very unsafe. Okay. Then the opposite can also happen. Nervous or vagal dysfunction can also be an underactive vagus nerve. And this is where we see people have issues with being stuck in that chronic fight-flight state. Okay, so we're not getting enough parasympathetic activity. You may have difficulties with speech and communication, stuttering, and that's because the vagus nerve innervates the vocal cords. Okay. And so if the vagus nerve is underactive, it can't control the voice box or the vocal cords as well, and you end up with that stuttering. Why am I stuttering as I say it? Increased heart rate, hypervigilance, anxiety, even defecation and gut problems. Okay, and that's because the vagus nerve is not innervating and controlling the gut as it should. And of course, struggling to feel safe and grounded, okay? Being able to come back down to calm. You're really struggling with that because you're stuck in the sympathetic state. And so this diagram is a nice summary of everything that we've been through so far. So let's start with the safety of social engagement. This is the ventral vagal nerve, okay? This is where we feel present, grounded, joyful, curious. We want to connect with other people, okay? Then as arousal picks up, we get into the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight, flight. Okay. And this is where we experience a whole myriad of symptoms or emotions. Okay. Anger, rage, irritation, frustration, worry, anxiety, fear, panic. Okay. And then when this becomes too much, It's like, okay, I'm feeling all of these feelings, but I can't handle it. I'm going to move into the shutdown, the freeze, okay? And this is the dorsal vagal. This is where we are unable to handle the sheer amount of energy and activation. We don't feel safe. And so we immediately move into numbing, dissociation, depression, conservation of energy, like the hibernation, and that's why a lot of people who are stuck in freeze struggle to lose weight because their metabolisms are so, what's the word? Conservative. And the metabolism doesn't want to spend unnecessary energy, and so they can survive on really low calories. And so if they try to lose weight, they can't, because like, where are your calories going to go? To zero. um and so coming out of freeze is going to be about coming back down into this fight flight. So when you come out of freeze, you don't jump straight back to the social engagement system. You don't jump straight into rest digest. No, you're going to go back into activation. And a lot of people, when they come out of that freeze, because they are no longer in dangerous situations, they finally feel a sense of safety in their life, that's when all of these emotions come up and they think it's a bad thing. And they're dealing with a lot of fight flight energy, a lot of their life force energy coming back, and they don't know how to deal with it. And they think it's a bad thing. Let me tell you this, honey, coming out of freeze into fight flight is always going to happen. And it is a good thing. It's a sign that you are able to now deal with a lot of the trauma that you were suppressing by being stuck in freeze. And we're going to talk about that later on as well, about how to deal with this, how to get out of freeze, how to deal with the fight flight energy, how to master your fight flight stress physiology, and how to get back into social engagement. So to summarize, the physiology of the nervous system, physiology meaning how things work, how the nervous system works, there are actually 4 main states that our nervous system can be in, contrary to popular belief. Most people think it's fight, flight, rest, digest. Well, I'm here to tell you it's actually the prosocial, which is the ventral vagal, the sympathetic, which is fight, flight, high tone dorsal vagal, yeah, it's a mouthful, which is the shutdown freeze, and then the low tone dorsal vagal, which is rest, digest. So those are the 4 main systems that you need to understand. And when your nervous system is able to flow and move between the 4 systems effectively, appropriately, in a healthy way, this is where we get regulation, okay? So let's talk about, or summarize, how the system breaks down, how dysregulation in the nervous system happens. I'm going to use the example of the infant, because most of the time this is where misattunement happens. The nervous system is misattuned from a young age, although it can definitely happen in adulthood as well. The infant shuts down when their needs are not met. Okay, they're not taught how to regulate because their primary caregiver never teaches them. If you think about a baby who has a mother, I'm going to use the example of a mother, could be a father as well, a mother who doesn't know how to nurture them well. They don't know how to regulate. They don't know how to move through the 4 branches of the nervous system effectively. They're always stuck in fight, flight, stuck in freeze. They don't know how to go into prosocial. They don't know how to go into rest, digest, okay? You end up growing up in this freeze state. And because you're stuck in freeze, you can't access rest, digest, you end up with chronic health issues because you don't end up healing. And you end up with a lack of self-regulation. You're highly stressed, but you're still going. And people grow up and live their lives in this state. And so we like to say that the cost of doing business is high. The cost of survival in the only way you knew how means you're going to end up with a misattuned nervous system, with chronic health issues, and you're not going to have a very good life, unfortunately. And a little bit more on the point of co-regulation on the next slide is really about parenting, generational trauma. I'm going to use the example of the hot baby. I'll also use an example of sleep training. I think these are 2 really good examples to drive this point home. Firstly, the hot baby is a good example of how trauma and disconnections with the body and dysregulated nervous systems can happen from seemingly harmless things. So the example I always use is, it's a really cold winter's day. The mother and her child are about to go to the supermarket. So the mother swaddles the baby in a lot of layers and a beanie and thick socks and takes the baby to the supermarket. They get inside the supermarket. It's quite warm from the heater. Even the mother herself takes off her jacket. Now, the baby's starting to get really hot and the baby starts to cry. They start to get red in the face and they're getting really fitful, right? And if the mother cannot read the cues and the signs, the stress survival response from her baby, she may see that as, oh, the baby's just throwing a fit. But babies don't throw a fit for no reason. And unfortunately, parents don't know that. They are sending you signals that they need regulation. Um, they need soothing, they need nurturing. And so the mother may misread it. Maybe she's unaware. Maybe she is herself very stimulated, very triggered, and this is where generational trauma comes in. Maybe the mother was never taught how to regulate from her mother. And so that passes down to the child. So the mother starts to shush her baby up, starts to fret, tries to tell the baby to shut up, shush, stop crying, doesn't pick the baby up, doesn't take the baby's jumper off, doesn't cuddle her baby and press on her on his chest, hold the baby firmly, really just soothe the baby. Sometimes you just need to let the baby press the baby's ear against your chest. Let the baby hear your heart rate. You yourself are calming down. You're breathing deeply. Your heart rate is nice and steady. You're cooing and wooing like, shh, it's okay, baby, shh. Ooh. And the baby is going to start to match that of the mother. The baby is going to match the heart rate of the mother, the breathing rate of the mother. And this is what I mean by co-regulation. The only form of self-regulation in infancy is through co-regulation. So the mother has heard the baby's cries. The mother can read the baby's stress response and see, okay, the baby's red, the baby's distressed, the baby's too hot. Let me take off the jumper. And I'm going to pick that baby up in the middle of the supermarket and I'm going to soothe that baby firmly and gently. And I'm going to regulate my own physiology so that the baby matches my physiology. Okay. That is how a healthy nervous system is developed. Now, the issue is when the mother cannot read the cues. The issue is when the mother does not know how to self-regulate. The issue is when the mother is already in a heightened physiological state where disconnections start to happen within the baby. The messaging that the baby got from the mother was about fear. A really good example of this is Gabor Mate. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's very popular in the nervous system, PTSD, trauma, addiction space. He's a huge proponent of the ACE study as well. He does, I think, majority of his work as a physician has been looking at the link between childhood trauma and addiction in later life. He grew up in Hungary during World War II, and there was like a Nazi takeover in his country, and he was a Jewish baby. His mother gave birth to him, and understandably so, his mother was in a very stressed state. She was in a hospital with all these other mothers, not sure whether they're going to survive, not sure whether their babies are going to survive. And so he said, obviously he doesn't have memories of this, but he knows now that he has the understanding and the knowledge that he would have picked up on all of the sensations that his mother was experiencing. And babies are very sensitive, and he never got taught that regulation through everything I've been talking about. That baby got faulty information on how to soothe, okay, through all of these non-verbal experiences and a lack of nurturing. So my use of this example is to highlight that sometimes it's not the mother's fault. Yes, sometimes it could be because of ignorance. It could be because of generational trauma that the mother did not know how to break the cycle of. But sometimes it's really just life. It's circumstances. I'm sure Gabriel Mate's mother was just trying her best, and he says it himself. She was doing her best, but her shaking while she holds her baby, not being held firmly with a confidence and assertiveness and firmness, but still gentle and tender, that really messes up a child. And that's what I meant when I said that trauma isn't necessarily one big hard event. It could be from this low level insidiousness that seems harmless, that seems even healthy, but really is actually messing up this child's healthy nervous development. Another example is sleep training. Sleep training is now being debunked as a very unhealthy way to train your baby. Babies shouldn't be taught to self-soothe because self-soothing doesn't exist. It doesn't work as a child. So putting your baby in the cot far removed from you in another room and hearing that baby cry and letting that baby cry themselves to sleep is not doing what you think it did. Okay. It's causing that baby to go into shutdown. It's causing that baby to get stuck in the freeze state. And this means they're not going to have a developed social engagement system. It means that they're not going to be in rest digest, and you're setting them up for a lifetime of unsafety, a lifetime of chronic health problems, and a lifetime of suffering, if you really think about it. And, all these parenting books from the early 2000s are now becoming, debunked as all of these nervous system practitioners are coming out and saying, hey, this is really damaging. So it really just goes to show how Western society is really messing up all of our nervous systems. It really does start with something as simple as parenting. It does start with something as simple as suppressing emotions, of how we are expected to show up as robots and to ignore the inner cues and intuition that we were born with, we were graced with. We are meant to pick up our babies when they cry. We are meant to connect with our babies and sleep with them and not let them be so far from you after you've just given birth to them. And this whole medicalization of birth and the birthing experience, even the traumatization to the mother during birth, is all connecting the dots of how trauma starts in early development of a child. It really connects the dots as to how misattunement happens. And this actually links to the next slide really nicely, because there was this article that came out a while ago called Why African Babies Don't Cry. And it's basically talking about how they are so much more resilient, they are so much healthier, they have much better developed nervous systems than the West. And it's not just African babies, it's Southeast Asian babies, it's Middle Eastern babies. In general, the ethnic way of raising your child is a much healthier way. And I'm so blessed that I had an ethnic mother who used to, tell us when we were kids, I can't believe that, like, this friend of mine, doesn't sleep next to her baby, or she lets them cry themselves to sleep. Like, she used to look down upon these methods of parenting back in the early 2000s when all these parenting books were coming up. And she used to always say, that's nonsense, that's bullshit. And now, as an adult, now that I've learned all of this, I have so much respect for her because she followed in her intuition. She followed nature's way of raising a child. And that's what most ethnic countries do. They're a lot more eased, they're laid back, there's more connection, less medicalization, more home births. Doctors aren't forcing certain methods of birth upon their patients. The mother is heard. The mother is not in a stressed fight flight state while she's giving birth. She's very relaxed. It's a very beautiful experience. The babies stay close to their mothers, not just from birth, but even throughout their childhood. Like, if you look at how children react when they're put in childcare, and you can see how terrible it is for them. And then we call it separation anxiety. Well, yeah, babies shouldn't be separated from their mother. Kids, early infants or young toddlers shouldn't be separated from their mothers, and ethnic people got it right. They knew this, not just in how they're raised by their mothers, but in how they express themselves. Babies in ethnic countries can be loud, they can run around, they can scream, they can cry. They're not told to just be seen and not heard. They're allowed to be expressive. They are listened to, and mothers are a lot more receptive of the child. Now, the West is very much about discouraging a lot of the things that ethnic countries embrace. And then you look at in adulthood what happens. You see that African and other ethnic backgrounds, these kids grow up in worse conditions. They're from war-torn countries, famine, harsh conditions in general, and yet they bounce back much faster. There are improved rates of mental health problems. Like it's just not as bad as Western countries. And then you wonder why. I personally I am of the opinion that it's because of the attunement to their nervous systems when they were younger, because it's not necessarily about the conditions in which they grew up. It's not about how much trauma that they've experienced. It's about how resilient they are in handling it. Despite the better living conditions that the West experiences and grows up in, our people, our children are significantly less resilient. There are significantly more health concerns, mental health concerns, and the resilience is because, or the lack of resilience is because their nervous systems were not developed the way that they should have been. They were not listened to, they were not connected to their mothers. You know, there's even a saying in North Africa, where I'm from, they say the child's feet do not touch the ground until 2 years old. They are joined to the hip of the mother from such a young age. The West is simply not like that. And I know that it's no one's fault in particular. It's just the system itself, you know, and it's something that needs to change. And I really hope you listening, now that you have the knowledge, you have the understanding, make a change, be a new generation, be part of a new generation that breaks the cycle and goes back to the original, the OG, the organic way of parenting, and see what happens. See how you break generational cycles after you've healed yourself as well. You know, like it's not just about how you raise your child, it's about how you heal yourself. Because, like I mentioned earlier, if you don't know how to regulate yourself, you will never teach your child how to regulate. So, the best thing you can do for your future child, if you plan to have them, or even if you don't and you end up having them, and you end up raising this child, the best thing that you can do for them is learn how to regulate now, learn how to heal now. Because when that child needs you, you need to be in a state where you can be receptive to their needs. You can shift your physiological states harmoniously, and you don't have dysregulation. So that way you can teach them the same through co-regulation. That is the best thing that you can do. And so, yeah, this slide kind of summarizes what I've been saying. Parenting books are crap. There's only one kind of parenting, and it's the parenting that animals in the wild do. It's the parenting that ethnic or most ethnic parents do. It's the natural, the organic way. It's about nurture, protection. You listen to your kids, you listen to them, you let them express themselves, unconditional love. You teach them self-regulation through co-regulation. You also add diversity through positive stress. So you don't want to bubble wrap them. You know, they need to experience the life. They need to build resilience, you know. You need to teach them how to be in the world, teach them how to listen to their bodies, and you need to be very firm and assertive with them. So, you know, the mother bear, as an example, they're not going to lick their cub with aggression. They're going to lick the cub with care. They're not going to see their cub go into danger or let a human approach their cub. No, they're going to go straight into defense mode. They're going to attack whoever comes near their cub. That is how we should be as parents. That is how we should raise our children. And unfortunately, the West is really late. You know, like I said, this nervous system stuff is very new. We've only learned about this in the last 10, 20 years or so. But I think trusting your intuition, trusting the ancient methods that have been inbuilt within us will get you a lot further than the science, because the science is always catching up. The science is always late. And so I think this is a really important lesson to break these generational cycles. Okay, to wrap up this section of the video, what we've learned about trauma so far. Number one, your body did a good thing. It reacted the way it was supposed to, and it shut down when it couldn't fight or flee. Okay. Number two, emotions are not meant to be suppressed. Stress energy that is stored makes your system backed up. It backs up your system and it wears it down. Emotions need to be felt and dealt with in the moment. That's what I was talking about integrating and processing emotions and procedural memories. You need to make sure you deal with it in the moment. Otherwise, it gets backed up in the system. It gets stored and you've got to deal with it later, right? Number three, when your nervous system isn't wired or attuned correctly as a child, you learn how to disconnect from your body and live life functionally frozen. So you're frozen, but you're still pushing through and you're kind of like half on, right? This makes you susceptible to chronic illness in the long term. And of course, it doesn't help you develop a good social engagement system. So that's number 4. If you don't develop a healthy system in infancy, you will misread cues in your environment. You will struggle to connect with others, and your gut feelings will be very off. It's like traveling to a foreign country without Google Translate or even a dictionary or even knowing the language. Okay. It's like, how am I supposed to communicate in this language when I don't even know the first word of that language? Number 5, you may not have grown up in an abusive household, and you may have had loving parents who just did their best, but you can still display classic signs of trauma and a dysregulated nervous system. And generational trauma can be passed down too through the mechanisms I explained. Also, I don't know if you guys have heard of this study. It's a study that came out, I think, 5 to 10 years ago, very recently, talking and studying generational trauma. So they did this experiment with a bunch of rats, and they would spray cherry blossom spray. Okay, so after they sprayed it, they would then deliver a shock, like an electric shock, to the rats. And so they did some classical conditioning where the rat would associate the smell of cherry blossoms with an electric shock. Eventually, they started to spray the cherry blossom without any electric shock coming after it, and then the rats would go into this activated, sympathetic state. Now, what's interesting is they bred the rats, and then they took the children or the babies of those rats, and then they sprayed the cherry blossom. No electric shock, and yet the infant mice still were activated. They were triggered. They had the same stress response, which is wild. Generational trauma is a thing. Trauma can be passed down. It's encoded in the body. It changes your genetics in a way that we still don't know yet. And it gets passed down through the genes, through the parents' lived experiences to the child. So if this ain't a sign to start healing for the sake of your future generations and your future lineage, I don't know what is. Okay, this is everything you need to know about what's been going on. Now, let's learn how to heal it, right? Let's learn how to come out of freeze, come back into body. So here are the steps to healing trauma. Step 1 is to find safety. You are never going to be able to do any of the work that's coming up if you are constantly in a dangerous setting, whether it's an unhealthy, toxic relationship, a bad home life, whether it's your family or your housemates. If you are in a really high stress job, you need to find safety. You need to find calm. You need to find quiet in order to do this work. Step 2 is to know what's going on, which we've done over the last hour and a half. Step 3 is to generate what should have been there in the first place, which is learning the language, which is learning how to shift gears and how to integrate all of these stress responses and stored survival memories, okay, which you're going to learn about in the coming slides. Step 4 is connecting with others and getting support. This is so big for your social engagement system. It's not good to be isolated. It's not good to have to go through this alone. You need to connect with others. Step 5 is to build capacity to feel your feelings and to prepare for this trauma release. So it's not something that happens overnight. It's not like, okay, yep, I know how to feel my feelings now, so I'm going to go ahead and process all these traumas. It doesn't work that way. It takes, I would say, years. It takes a long time to build capacity to feel your feelings, because you might only be able to tolerate this tiny amount, and then in a month's time, just a little bit more. But maybe something really big happened to you, and it's what I call the big kahuna. It's the great big event that you haven't processed yet. You might not be able to handle the emotion flooding associated with that event for maybe another few months or years. So you need to build capacity bit by bit. And then step 6 is when you're ready, when your body is ready, when you've built that capacity and you've freed up a little bit of space in your system, then you can start to let this stress energy come out in a healthy way, in a safe way. And then that's where you start to get more resilient. That's where you start to become more regulated. That's when your nervous system starts to work the way it's supposed to. So those are the steps, and we're going to go through them now. All right, let's talk about coming out of being functionally frozen. Being functionally frozen is a really good survival response when you're in a state of danger, like when you were a child and everything was happening and going on around you, which is why step one is to find safety, because you're not going to be able to come out of being functionally frozen when you're not safe. This is how it manifests. You live life half on, it's either you're really, really activated and you're looking for arousal, you're looking for danger all the time, or you're just completely like shut down, or you're both. And that's why a lot of people who have this nervous system dysfunction tend to seek drama, toxic relationships, and destructive cycles. It's because it's all they've ever known, right? And so I think it's important, if you recognize this pattern in you, not to judge yourself or berate yourself, and to treat yourself with kindness, knowing that it's supported by science. It makes sense that you are the way you are. You were built for it, if it makes sense. Like, you were literally built to only live around that. And so, yes, there's a lot of work in breaking that cycle, but you've got to treat yourself with kindness here. Dissociation is normal considering the context, and it's a really good coping mechanism. But again, health issues start to pop up, and this is a result of your system wearing out. There's just too much fight and stress energy. It's taking up too much space, and it's like holding in shit. I love this analogy, even though it's very graphic. It's like, imagine if every time you needed to go to the toilet and drop a deuce, you just held it in, and then eventually, over the next few months, every time you eat, you get this really painful wave of like electric, flooding through your gut, trying to get this waste out, because, it doesn't have any room left for more food to come in. And so you associate food as bad. Like, you just think, oh, I'm allergic to food, I can't have food. Girl, that's not the problem. The problem is that you've been holding in so much food from the past that you haven't processed, you haven't let come out of your system yet. So that is essentially what being functionally frozen is. And this is where you end up with burnout. This is where you end up with a lack of resilience. You think that, oh, the tiniest thing gets you off. The tiniest thing just completely throws you off for days, weeks, months. And you're like, why is this affecting me so much? Why am I lacking so much resilience? It's because you have a full stress bucket, and just adding a little drop causes it to spill. What do you need to do? You need to empty out the stress bucket. You need to empty out that waste. Go to the damn toilet. It's one of my clients calls it emotional diarrhea. You got to let the diarrhea out, So let's just assume that step one is done, okay, which is finding safety. That gives you space and an opportunity to come out of being functionally frozen. So when you are finally safe, you will naturally notice this happen. Your body will start to bring up a lot of feelings that you've been stuck ignoring, right? And so you start to get very, very activated. You get into this really high physiological state, and that is the freeze break coming off. Now, a lot of people think it's a bad thing. They think, oh no, I'm feeling things. Oh no, I'm really anxious. I'm getting all these panic attacks. I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know how to feel it. This is bad. I want to go back to how I was before. I was fine before. No, you weren't. You were not fine before. You were stuck in freeze, and the freeze break has come up. That is a good thing. It's going to get really, really bad before it gets good. It's like the diarrhea, right? Like, you need to get it all out before you start feeling better. It feels really shit in the moment. No pun intended. It feels really bad, but eventually, once you've cleared the system and you've sat through the pain and all of the gushing, eventually you're going to feel good, right? So it's about sitting through it. And I'm going to give you tools to help you cope. But it's really important for you to understand that underneath all of that stress and, the shutdown, underneath all of that freeze is your life force energy, your fight and flight energy. Fight, flight energy is good. It's good to fight for yourself. It's good to survive. It's good to protect yourself. It's not good to be in hibernation. And so this high physiological state, this terror, these somatic experiences that have been trapped and are coming out is a good thing. So when you start to experience a panic attack, let it come out. It's a good thing, okay? It's a really good thing. When you start to experience the anxiety, lean into it. Going back to that very first slide on emotions, lean into the discomfort. Now, it's important that you don't go too far, because if you don't know how to handle it, you can actually re-traumatize yourself. And so if you are having this really, really bad panic attack, a lot of my clients have experienced this, where, they start to lean into it and they're embracing it, but then they end up becoming too distressed, it's too much, and then they shut down. And some of them even faint or black out. And that blackout is, if you remember the physiology, is the freeze break coming back on. So we don't want to come out of freeze just to go back into it, right? We don't want to come out of freeze, open the door, and then see this wave of emotions, and then that just forces you to go back into freeze. We want to feel just enough and experience just enough, but not too much to the point where we re-traumatize ourselves and then put on that dorsal brake that causes us to shut down again. That's what re-traumatization is. And that's what talk therapy can do for you as well, or to you, if you don't have good foundations on board, if you haven't done the groundwork to build up a bit of capacity to handle these feelings, but also have the tools to bring you back down to calm, that soothe you, but don't numb you out. You see what I mean? And you know what's another really good example of this? Ayahuasca. I'm sure y'all have heard people who have like a lot of trauma and a lot of shit to work through. People say, hey, have you considered going to Peru, finding a shaman and, going through an ayahuasca retreat? Well, that is possibly the worst thing you can do for yourself, because you're taking someone who's never experienced anything in their lives, or okay, that's a reach. They go out of their way to not experience feelings, and you're going to put them in a situation where they are going to experience everything all at once. Even me, I'm someone who's very regulated, thank the Lord Jesus. I'm someone who feels my feelings when they come up. I can handle a lot of immense uncomfortable feelings. I don't even think I could handle that if I was at an ayahuasca retreat. You're not going to take someone and throw them in the deep end and expect them to swim. No. And then you end up with psychosis. Do you know how many people have done ayahuasca and then they end up having a psychotic break? They end up in hospital. They end up with a split personality disorder. It's very, very similar to what traumatized you in the first place, right? And it's because you don't know how to stay grounded when you're getting flooded by these high physiological states, okay? So let's talk about how to do it in a healthy way, okay? It's good that you're letting out that intensity. So we don't want to calm it down, okay? We want to let it out. We need to unlock the tension in our body. But what we want to do is we want to incorporate a little bit of diversity. We don't want to just breathe through it, okay? So if your only go-to is breathing, or just, doing meditations, or just, okay, let me just sit through it and just, it's like monocrops in farming. So I don't know if you guys know about monocrops. It's like taking one crop and growing it across a vast amount of land, okay? It's not good for the ecosystem because, firstly, if there's like an outbreak, like a disease or a cancer, it's going to kill the entire land, okay? Whereas if you have diversity in the crops, then other crops can withstand that and it won't kill the soil, right? Likewise, you have diverse soil, and overall, it's just really good for the ecosystem and for the surrounding insects and fauna and flora that are in that environment. It's good to have diversity. We want to have diversity when it comes to handling the fight flight energy coming out, okay? So what you want to do is you want to let your body lead, okay? And this comes up in this next slide, but I'll start on it now because it flows. When you're experiencing this flooding of energy, your body is going to feel called to move in a certain way. I encourage you to go through with it. So a very common one that comes up with my clients a lot is they want to curl up in a ball and just like rock, like in a fetal position. That is a good example of a procedural memory, an encoded movement pattern or posture that your nervous system is still sending to your muscles. It's a signal that's still being sent. By curling up in a ball in that fetal position, you're going into a very protective posture. If you think about someone falling from a building, if you think about someone being hit and attacked, what's the first default movement pattern that they're going to do? They're going to curl up in a ball. It's a very, very protective movement pattern because you're protecting all of the core organs. You're protecting your head, your chest. You're less likely to break any bones in that position. It's very soothing as well. It's a very soothing movement. And so if you feel cold, if your body feels cold in that moment to just curl up in a ball and rock, go ahead and do that. Maybe you feel cold to just scream. I want to scream. I want to punch something. That's exactly what you should do. This is incorporating diversity in a very specific way, in a way that matches the event. So you know how I was talking about the dog bite at the park? How you wanted to raise your arms up in defense, but you didn't get the chance to. And I said, in order to release and integrate that experience, you needed to raise your arms up. Otherwise, you're going to get a locked shoulder. And a lot of people who have sporting injuries have these locked movement patterns that they need to unleash. That's exactly what you've got to do. And you may not necessarily link the two events, the event and the movement pattern, but your body still knows. Because, like I said, you may not have any declarative or explicit memories, but you have the implicit memories you need to work through. Um, Maybe the screaming and shouting and punching is an anger and aggression that you never got the chance to experience. And I know a lot of people who grew up in households where they weren't allowed to express their feelings. They were told anger is a bad thing. That's not true. Anger is a very healthy thing. Healthy aggression is very important. Everyone needs that. If you were not allowed to experience that, you may have a lot, years and years of anger within that you need to get out. I'm not saying go punch a wall. I'm not saying go scream when you're at work. Obviously, you wait till you get home, you wait till you get to the gym, and you put on some boxing gloves and you punch the shit out of a bag. Punch the shit out of a pillow if you don't have access to one. I think the worst thing you can do or say to a young boy who has a lot of aggression built up, who's got a lot of anger, is, oh, that's toxic. That's toxic masculinity. No, it's not. What you're doing is you're actually telling them not to follow their body's impulses. You're telling them not to regulate in the way that they need, because regulation of the nervous system is very specific. Okay. You can't just shake it out. You can't just talk. Some people want to talk and cry. Other people want to yell, scream, and shout and punch. It really depends on the procedural memory that you need to unlock. Okay. So that is the best way to come out of freeze in a healthy and specific way that truly deactivates the procedural memories that have been encoded for years and years and years. Okay. You want to do it in a safe way, in a healthy way. You want to do it when it's appropriate. Sometimes, yes, you do need to put it to the side because you're in a situation where you don't want to scare the people around you. But when you come home, you deal with it, right? And that is the basics. In fact, that is somatic experiencing in a nutshell. Somatic experiencing is literally connecting with your somatic body. It is allowing all of the experiences to come out, okay? And it helps you deal with the intensity of coming out of freeze in a healthy way, okay? Now, a couple of other ways to do somatic experiencing besides following your body's impulses is firstly just connecting with your body, especially if you're somebody who experiences a lot of dissociation and they struggle to get in body. Basic biological sensing can really help. So just doing a sweep of your body, so doing check-ins. I have a client, she does 3 check-ins a day, okay, because she experiences quite a lot of dissociation right now. So she's got an alarm on her phone, quite literally. It's not the it's a very calm, like I think it's one of the fairy chime ones. We don't want to activate her with the alert itself. But yeah, 3 times a day. I think it's like 9, 1, and 7 p.m. or something. Something as simple as that, right? And she does a sweep from head to toe. Okay, how am I feeling up here? Okay, where's the tension? Is there tension in my jaw, in my traps? Okay, what's going on with my shoulders? Oh, do my arms feel a bit stiff? Do I maybe need to do some arm swings? Okay, what's going on with my chest? Oh, I'd love to just release a big. Whoa, see, I just realized I've been talking for the last almost 2 hours, and even I was getting really stiff there, and I just extended my thorax and I feel so much better doing that. And wow, there's a lot of tension in my neck. Maybe I should do some stretching after this. This is somatic experiencing. Okay. Even I sometimes, when I'm stuck at work and I'm really deep in my work, I forget that I'm actually in body. Like, let me just feel my feet on the ground right now. Okay. I'm actually a bit thirsty. I just realized I haven't taken a single sip the entire time I've been talking. So that felt really good. I needed that. And you know what? If I needed to pee, I'd get up and pee right now. Sometimes you'd be holding in your pee for far too long. Go and pee when you realize you need to pee. And as you get better and better at somatic experiencing, at feeling what's going on in your body, and actually addressing the needs that your body is telling you it has, you will pick up on them a lot quicker. You know, I lived a phase of my life when I was in chronic fight flight. You know, even though I had a very healthy upbringing, very healthy nervous system. You know how we said there's 4 kinds of trauma? I definitely had the accumulated stress one, and I was so disconnected from my body. I literally would dissociate in the middle of a workout. Like I'd be squatting heavy, like 70, 80 kilos. I'm squatting and I'm not even in my body. I don't even know what's going on. I've fully dissociated. I had pushed myself too hard. And so I had to do a lot of nervous system work because my nervous system was cooked. And it was literally, hey, Mary, are you hungry? You should go eat. You know what, Mary? I know you're obsessed with counting calories and you probably have an eating disorder, but I actually feel like I need more fat than what I'm giving myself. I feel like I want the whole avocado, not just a quarter. That's somatic experiencing. That's getting in body. Hey, I know I could technically go train right now, but I'm feeling a bit tired. I reckon I'd prefer to just go for a walk right now, just a light walk. I don't even care about steps. I don't care whether I get 10,000 or 12,000. I'm just going to go until I'm tired. It took me, I'm going to say 6 months to know how to go for a walk without hitting a step target and stopping when I'm tired or before I even get tired. Like this work is it's work. It's hard. It's really hard to get in body. It's really hard when you've disconnected for so long. When, pardon me, you've been taught, oh, you know what? That's another example of somatic experiencing. A burp coming up. Okay. Sometimes we suppress it. No, get it out. Like your body needs to pass gas. It needs to pass that burp. Somatic experiencing, baby. It happens in all the nuanced details and we don't realize it because we've been conditioned by society to put on a front, to keep going, to hit our goals, even when our bodies are sending red flags, warning signals, alert, alert, amber alert. Hey, we're not okay. No, 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 no. For the sake of your goals, for the sake of your meaningless job, for the sake of not coming across as weak, we're going to suppress it. No, that's not it. Somatic experiencing is 90% of the work that you have to do. And it literally looks like the little routine that I just did now. That's what it is. It helps you get out of freeze. It helps you connect with your body. It helps you stop dissociating. And as you get better, dissociation becomes less frequent. You notice when you've dissociated sooner, and eventually you stop dissociating altogether. Okay? Over time. Don't rush it though. Another key part of somatic experiencing is to deal with stresses in the moment. So the example that I love to use, it's such a good one, is stubbing your toe. How many times do you stub your toe and you just kind of like suppress the ouch? You're like, oof, because you know you're in the office. You don't want to let out a big scream. I'm sorry to say it, but you're gonna have to do a little bit more than that, okay? Because when you already have a full stress bucket, something as little as stubbing your toe can actually like add to an already backed up system, which we don't want. We don't want to add more to an already backed up system. We want to free up space. We want to keep moving all of this stress energy through the system. So the best thing you can do is deal with new stresses now so that you have capacity to handle the old stresses. Otherwise, you just keep piling shit on, and it's just more for you to deal with. So the best thing you can do now, as of the end of this video, is to deal with stresses in the moment. So when you stub your toe, you don't suppress it and just bite your lip. You let out that big scream. You take your shoe off and you cradle that big toe because it needs a little bit of cradling and it needs some pressure. You know how sometimes just putting some compression on a bruise can really help? Sometimes you need to do that in the moment. When you have an awkward conversation or a fight with a friend, you bring it up in the moment. Don't leave it for days or weeks brewing inside. Express how you feel. And if you don't know how to do that, if you don't have that healthy aggression, write it down. Practice saying it. I know it sounds very juvenile and it sounds almost childlike. Like I really have to notice when I need to pass gas. I have to notice when I need to use the toilet. I have to I have to practice speaking before I confront someone. I have to verbalize how that person made me feel. That sounds like I'm teaching a child their ABCs and one, two, threes. That's exactly what you're doing. That's exactly what you're doing. It can be very repetitive in nature, and it's very much repeating, rote learning, drilling it down until you nail it. And it takes a lot longer than you think, especially when you've spent decades disconnected. Don't think this is something you can overcome in a few weeks. This is a lifetime of work. Okay. Um, so moving on to the tools that will help you do this. I've already talked about quite a few of them. So the check-ins are really helpful. Following your body's impulses whenever you feel the need to release, or whenever you are releasing any sort of fight flight energy. So when the freeze break comes off and the intensity starts flooding, let it come out and follow the body impulses as they come to. Like, ask yourself, check in with your body. What does my body feel called to do right now while I'm feeling this heightened state? And go ahead and do it. Okay. Reparent yourself. So very much like how you would teach your child to express themselves, how you would ask your child, hey, do you need to eat something? Are you thirsty? Do you need to go to the toilet before we leave? Is your tummy hurting? Where is it hurting, honey? Point to me, point to it, show me. That is quite literally what you have to do. Oh, honey, do you feel uncomfortable around that person? Why do you, okay, what, that's okay. Do you know how to use your words? So if someone makes you feel uncomfortable, you say, no, I don't want to hug you, uncle. No, I don't want. That's reparenting yourself. It's, honey, that person, they're just trying to help you. It's okay. You don't have to be worried. Like, I know it sounds like, I don't want it to sound degrading. I don't want it to sound condescending or like, oh, you don't know anything. You're a child. But at the same time, you were never taught this. Or maybe you do just need to be kinder to yourself and just address basic needs. So I would encourage you to treat yourself the way you would treat your child. That is how you reparent yourself. And that is how you get that nervous system plasticity. That's how you start to myelinate and innovate parts of your nervous system that weren't there to begin with, or that have, I guess, fallen off over time. They've been ignored and they've pruned over time. All right, now let's talk about how to get you back down to calm without going back into freeze. So when we're soothing, we're bringing our physiology into rest digest without going into freeze. Because like I said earlier, with the dorsal vagal nerve, they present the same, but they are not the same. They both present as calm, but one is soothing you and healing you. Another is actually numbing you out. Okay, so when you're in this really activated state and you feel like I can't handle it anymore, don't force yourself to keep feeling it. That's fine. Get out. You don't want to re-traumatize yourself, get out. We want to drip by drip increase exposure. It's like exposure therapy. We don't want too much in a short burst of time. So what you're going to do is you're going to utilize orienting and pendulation. Okay, these are two really good tools to help. The first one, orienting, is all about using your environment and the world around you to help ground yourself. Okay, we have explorative orienting, and that is literally just like for pleasure. There's no fear around it. You're just taking in your environment. So I could do it right now. So what's around me? Okay, I have my water bottle, which is quite full because I've barely drank any. I should probably drink some. Okay. There's actually quite a lot of clutter on my desk right now. I should probably clean it later. There's barely any sun out. It's what, almost 11 a.m. and it's so dark outside. And if you have nature around you, I highly recommend that you use nature. So if you have a place in your house that is a source of safety and comfort to you, I highly recommend making that your safe place and using it to help you orient. So if you're in this really activated state, you're having a panic attack, you can't handle it anymore, you want to come back down to calm, go to your safe space. Maybe that's your outdoor area, like your backyard, and use nature to help ground you. So you would look outside. Oh, the breeze is lovely at night. It's a full moon. I love how beautiful the moon looks. Oh, how many stars can I count? take your shoes and socks off and actually feel the soil beneath the grass that you stand on and really sense the environment around you. Why do you think nature is such a goaded form of regulation? Why is it that suddenly your problems go away when you go traveling? Because you're experiencing the world around you in this explorative, orienting capacity. Okay. Orienting is such a good way to help bring you back down to calm. Now, there is also a defensive orienting, and this is where you notice dangers around you. Okay. Now, when we get traumatized or when bad things happen to us a lot, especially when we're growing up and we're in a constant state of attack and we're constantly put in a stress response, we can become hyper vigilant to the environment, and we see it as a danger. The world is not a safe place for us. So we become very defensively, or we defensively orient a lot, okay? And that's not a good thing. So we want to learn how to engage with the world around us in an explorative way, and to not look for danger, but to look for pleasure and seek comfort in it. Now, another thing can actually happen though, when you have grown up in a lot of stress, is we can shut out of the environment. We go completely internal because feeling the physiology is too intense. And I don't want to feel it. I don't want to experience the world around me because I just have such a bad track record with it. So I'm going to, for the sake of my own sanity, I'm going to just go internal. I'm going to just be so internal in here. I'm not going to connect to this. I'm not going to connect to everything around me. I'm just going to be stuck in my head. Okay. So orienting in an explorative way is a way to bring you back into the environment, bring you back into the world, and to be present in a non-defensive way, in a curious way. And it helps get you out of your body when your physiology is too much. So whenever you're feeling like my physiology is overwhelming me, I can't handle it anymore, I'm going to swing and move into the environment. And that leads me to pendulation. So if you think about what a pendulum is, it swings like this from one extreme to the other. Okay. That's exactly what we're doing. When we feel like we've hit the extreme of our physiology, we can't handle it anymore, we're going to shift away from it into something that is calming, and you can orient in that way. So we can shift or swing from overwhelm to calm by utilizing nature, utilizing your safe space. So I wouldn't consider my desk a place where I can help ground myself. I would say that my backyard is a much nicer place. There's also a beautiful track right next to my house. I can drive there in 5 minutes. I love it. It's such a beautiful place to be. Even when the weather is trash, it really helps ground me. And whenever I feel overwhelmed, being stuck at my desk, being stuck in my room is not good. I don't like it. It doesn't help ground me, and it actually makes me stuck in body. I'm too focused on what's going on in here. I need to get out. I need to pendulate away from the overwhelm, find my safe space, orient, notice what's happening around me, and even notice other parts of my body. So maybe I'm having a panic attack and like I'm feeling it mostly around here. Okay. And obviously I'm going to verbalize it. Okay, what's going on? Okay, tension in my jaw. My traps are really, really tight. My heart is racing. My chest is tight. My head is throbbing. Okay, what's happening south of the border? Like what's going on down in my legs? Okay, my legs feel a lot better than the upper half of my body. My feet feel a lot better. I'm actually going to stretch my toes out, and I'm just going to feel all the muscles in my lower limbs. That's another form of pendulating. So I'm pendulating away from something that's really extreme and uncomfortable to something that's a lot more pleasant. You can use the environment to do that, or you can use other parts of your body to do that. Okay. So spend a bit of time there. Then pendulate back to the parts of your body that don't feel so good and notice the differences. Okay, I've just pendulated for the last 5 minutes, and I've been exploratively orienting around me, and I've noticed all the beauty of the night sky, and I've noticed my feet on the ground. Let's come back to what's been happening. Okay, my heart rate slowed down. Yeah, I'm hyperventilating, but a lot less. How much less? 40% less. I'm not 100% better, but I'm significantly better than I was before. Okay. How about I start taking some deep breaths now? Okay. Air is coming in easier now. My airways are not so constricted. All right. My shoulders are a little bit more relaxed. That is bringing yourself down to calm without numbing yourself out, without going into shutdown. See how I'm shifting my physiology? I'm shifting states in a healthy, regulated way. I'm allowing myself to feel the fight flight energy, which is your life force energy, which is healthy, which is the stress energy that needed to come out. And when it became too much, I had a boundary. I said, I'm not going to feel any more than this. I can't. I'm going to utilize my tools. I'm going to use my environment, and I'm going to use healthy neuroception to bring myself back down to calm. Another way you can do this is actually through leveraging your support system. I'm going to call a friend. I'm going to call for my partner who's really supportive. Maybe he's just trying to help in the best way he can. He doesn't know how to. Show him this video. I'm happy for you to show it to him because education is key. I had another client. She's like, when I have these panic attacks, my partner, he's amazing, but he doesn't know what to do. He's like, oh, do you want a hug? And she doesn't know what to ask him for. He wants to be there for her. He wants to help her. He just doesn't know how. Have the education on board, because she said to me, that this client, she said, I love my backyard. My backyard is my safe space, but I can't even bring myself outside when I'm in this state. I'm so overwhelmed. And I said, okay, this is where your partner can help you do this. They can help you orient. They can help you pendulate. So they'll physically take you to the backyard. Maybe they make you a hot mug of tea, and then you feel the warmth of the mug in your hands as they warm up your hands and they help calm you down. And you take a big sip, a nice drag of the tea as it nourishes and soothes you. Okay. And then he starts to orient around you. Hey, babe, have you noticed the full moon today? It's as beautiful as you. Hey, have you and maybe he starts to talk to you about his day. Maybe that's actually, it's not yes, it's a distraction, but it's not a bad distraction. It's actually a good distraction. The connection with others is helping you bring on board safety. They're helping you to calm your physiology down in a healthy way, okay? Because they don't want you to shut down. You don't want to just disconnect from your physiology. You still want to be in body, but you want to bring it gradually, level by level down. And you're doing this through utilizing tools. So lean on your support system. They will help you. Lean on these tools I've given you, and your neuroception will start to kick in a healthy way. You'll start to attune your nervous system as you practice this, okay? The last point I made was touch therapy and exercise. Exercise is a fantastic way, specifically weightlifting, to help you get in body. So if you struggle with connecting with your body, you don't even know what muscle tension feels like, go lift some weights and you'll know. Because you have to get in body in order to get that mind-muscle connection, to actually contract the muscle and to feel the weight. It's a fantastic way to feel your body. And also somatic experiencing practitioners. So you know how it said at the start, if you don't feel like you can do this work on your own, get a somatic practitioner. That's exactly what they do. They help you do this work. And so what they do is they work with, injured athletes who have a lot of stored survival tension, and they have a lot of locked movement patterns. What they do is they move through these movement patterns and these postures in gradual ways and help you connect through it, like with diaphragmatic breathing and somatic sensing. Another example of what a somatic practitioner would do is, let's say you're someone who's had a history of sexual trauma. And so you've disconnected from your pelvis a lot, your pelvic region. You don't really know what's going on there. You don't really, you can't sense, or you can't tolerate the sensation of that. And maybe there are certain positions that are linked to the positions that you were in when you were assaulted, like lying flat on your back on the edge of a bed. I'm sorry if this is really graphic, and if this is triggering you, you know what to do. But that is an example of a movement or a position that can be highly triggering. And it's about moving through these positions. It's about reconnecting with the body in a safe way. So what the somatic practitioner might do is they might say, okay, well, maybe you're not ready to touch your pelvis yet and connect with your pelvis. Can you touch your own arm? It could be something so distal from the structure that you're struggling to connect with, but just touch your arm. Okay, how does that feel? Could you caress your arm in a very soothing, maternal, nurturing way? Okay, can you massage your shoulders? Okay, and slowly you start to explore through touch therapy different parts of your body in a safe way. They might be the ones to do it. You might be the one to do it. It depends. Okay, it's very dynamic and interactive. And then eventually you start to connect with the womb. You start to connect with your pelvis. If you're somebody who has a history of sexual trauma and you also have a comorbidity like endometriosis, 30% of women with endo have had a history of sexual trauma. It can be very beneficial to do things like womb massages and to do touch therapy in that area and to bring a sense of safety and regulation and connection and somatic experiencing with this part of the body. And then slowly you would move into different positions. Okay, you might not feel comfortable lying on your back on the edge of the bed, but can you lie on your back on the ground? Okay, what happens when you bring your legs up to your chest? That might feel really triggering on week 1, but maybe week 20, you can do it. And you can sit through it. You can breathe through it, deep diaphragmatic breathing, and you can really connect with it without feeling activated. And you bring safety back on board. You teach and train your nervous system that you can be in this position and you can connect with these muscles and these structures of the body and these positions without having this this sympathetic fight-flight reaction. That is what somatic practitioners do. You can definitely do it on your own. If you feel like you can't, please get yourself a somatic practitioner. Okay. All right. So we've spoken about building capacity, which is doing it bit by bit. And the good thing is that the more you do this work, the more you develop resilience. So it's this last sentence here. Recovery from trauma builds resilience. You may think that you're a weak person. You may think, oh, I can't handle anything. I'm such a sissy. The more trauma you recover from, the more resilient you become. And then you also free up space in your system to handle more stress. So things that you couldn't handle a few years ago, you can handle now. Triggers that you couldn't interact with a while ago, you can interact with now in a healthy way. Your ability to overcome adversity now will increase your ability to handle future adversities. Yeah. So yeah, stress energy, freeing it up gives you those healing capacities. Yeah. You're basically moving through the system. It's that emotional diarrhea, like I spoke about. It's releasing all of the years of waste bit by bit. Okay. And then the more you release, the more space that you have to handle more. And so eventually you have an off day at work and you realize, hey, I actually got over that in a few days. Usually it takes me months. Usually I never get over it, you know, or hey, I had a fight with my partner and it didn't activate me as much as it usually does. I got over it so quickly. I expressed myself in a really healthy way and we worked through it really well. And not too long ago, I couldn't handle it. That is the beauty of and the magic of somatic experiencing as you build capacity. And it goes without saying, we really want to take our time with it. So this slide is very important. If you've zoned out, come back. I want you to come back. If y'all remember titration, this is something we used to do in high school and maybe like first year chemistry at uni. I remember doing it. It's basically an experiment we used to do where like you'd have an acid in this tube and then you'd have a base in the beaker. And there's a little a stopper, a little tap, I guess, where you would drip the acid into the beaker drip by drip, and you would have to be really controlled and careful not to open the switch or the tap too much, and then too much acid flows into the beaker and it destroys the experiment, because it's like between the 20th and the 21st drop where you get a color change, because the acid and the base have the perfect amounts or ratios to create that acid, the color change. So you want to make sure that you're not dripping it. Sorry, you're not flooding it, and then you ruin the experiment. You overwhelm yourself. You got to start again. Okay, you want to make sure you're going drip by drip until you get the perfect color change. That's basically what the experiment is, right? So it's important that you stay in control, because, like I've said many times now, we don't want that dorsal shutdown response to kick in. We don't want to black out when we've experienced too much stimulation. Okay, we want to avoid the re-traumatization, and we want to have an exit strategy. Okay, so it's really important that you have these resources, these tools on board, like I spoke about in the last couple of slides, to help you titrate this work bit by bit. And another thing that's really important is you can't decide to release the trauma. You can't decide now is the time I'm going to deal with that big kahuna, that big event that happened that I know I got to deal with, but I haven't done it yet. Your body will tell you when it's ready. Your nervous system will know when it's ready. It's going to bring things up in its own time. It's going to bring things to the surface when you're ready. You can't decide, hey, tonight I'm going to have a night terror about what happened to me as a child. All you're doing is you're doing the groundwork, the very boring, repetitive groundwork, like you're teaching a child and you're really hammering it down. That's all you're doing. Everything I showed you on this slide, connecting with your basic biological experiences, feeling stresses in the moment, following body impulses as they come up, as the intensity comes up, doing body check-ins, explorative orienting. That is what you're doing. And when you've built enough capacity and your body feels like it can trust you to handle it, then it's going to come up. It's going to come up in its own time. You have to be very receptive to the signs and signals that your body gives you. And that's why the groundwork is so important. And then all those suppressed or repressed memories will come out. Then all of the procedural memories and stored survival stress will resurface. And then you might even start remembering, like mentally remembering things that you've forgotten about. You know, sometimes those repressed and suppressed memories actually come out. And you're like, whoa, I forgot that actually happened. That is your body taking charge. I think the most important message for today is let your body lead in every way. Okay, let your body lead and have an intimate relationship with it. Nurture it, respect it, let it lead, and you follow. You follow in a submissive, in a caring, in a nurturing way. Okay. And then, of course, when that big fight does come out, that big event, let your body lead there as well. Let those procedural movement patterns out. You see a lot of people do these like trauma release exercises. And the reason they don't work is because, you know, the release exercise is not related to the event itself. Like you see some people online filming it and then they're just doing this big shake. But what if that had nothing to do with the trauma? You know, again, the resource or the release has to match the event. And that's why you can't do an ayahuasca ceremony. You can't do a cold plunge to heal your nervous system. You can't do a shake or a dance or a breathing meditation. You can't do any of this stuff to help heal your nervous system, to release the trauma, because the trauma is very specific, or sorry, the release is very specific to the trauma. You have to let your body lead. You have to let these procedural movement patterns out in the way that they were encoded. I'm actually going to skip a few slides because I feel like this is related to what I just spoke about. And that's about biohacking. So biohacking has been overplayed as a form of trauma release or a form of nervous system regulation. And it's actually, it doesn't work. Let's just put it that way. Look, these practices do have a time and a place, but we have to be nuanced, okay? So a biohack is hacking your physiology, hacking your biology, okay? So I think about the most popular ones being EMDR, humming, trauma release exercises, ayahuasca, breath work, cold exposure. So what they do is they are meant to elicit a fight-flight response in an artificial way. So if you think about the, I'll use cold plunges or cold exposure as an example. I think it's probably one of the most popular ones. It immediately puts you into a stress response, right? Now, what ends up happening if you have a dysregulated nervous system is you can't fight it. Of course, you can fight by choosing not to do it, you know, rejecting it. You can't fight because you want to be a good student who does the biohack in the right way. So you're not going to get out of the tub. And so what are you going to do? If you go back to basic stress physiology and the phylogenetic reality of how we respond to stress, we're going to we're going to shut down. We don't want to do that, because what you're doing is you're reinforcing the very thing you're trying to stop through this biohack. You're putting the dorsal brake on. You're not actually soothing yourself. You're numbing yourself out. Okay. And mind you, you already have so much stress energy inside. You are already filled to the brim with survival stress. Why would we add to that with a biohack like a trauma release exercise? You're just artificially eliciting this stress response, and then you're not responding to it in a good way. So it can actually cause flares in the system when you try to hack your way through it. And so I would encourage that you, I would encourage that you look at this as a shock trauma. because it is. If you think about cold exposure with a dysregulated nervous system in context, it's a shock trauma. Okay. You can't work that way. You've got to work from within. You don't look externally to start fixing. You've got to look within to start fixing it. Okay. So I've already said this. The biohack is just managing your system's dysregulation. Facts. Okay. It's just reinforcing the shutdown response, and it's not actually changing anything. It does not work. That's the long and the short of it. Okay. And then even this sentence really nails it. The imprint of how we wanted to fight needs to align. Otherwise, we're not resolving the event. I'm going to say that one more time. The imprint of how we wanted to fight needs to align. Otherwise, we're not resolving the event. Okay. We don't want to have flare ups in the system. We don't want to re traumatize yourself. We don't want to reinforce dysregulation. So we really need to match up the trauma release with the event, and your body is at the forefront, at the pinnacle of it. Your body will tell you how. You just need to learn how to listen and tune in and follow it. The languages will talk to each other when you know how to listen to your body. Okay. Okay, so going back, let's talk about triggers. So triggers, I hope you know by now, are about your neuroception. It's a response, a nervous system response to danger. Okay, so your nervous system, it's evaluating all the sensory information around you, and then it causes a change in your physiological state, and it shifts us into making us feel very defensive, very unsafe. And so what I would suggest that you do is avoid triggers that you cannot handle. Avoid triggers that you cannot handle. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing weak about avoiding a trigger, whether that's a person, a situation, a smell, a place. If you cannot handle it, if you do not have good regulation on board, avoid it. As you start to get a little bit more resilient, as you start to build capacity, and as you heal, your choices will expand. What you couldn't handle a few months ago, you will be able to handle. So it's okay to just take a step back and just avoid it for now. Okay. And it's also an open wound, mind you. And it's very, very sensitive. Okay. If you scratch an open wound, if you touch an open wound, you're going to be very reactive, right? It's far more sensitive than if you were to touch or scratch a closed wound. So what we want to do is we're going to let the trigger or the wound heal first. Okay. And to be kind to ourselves when we are reactive. Okay. It's good to be aware of your triggers. That's another thing. A lot of people are not aware of what their triggers are. They're not even realizing, hey, I'm actually getting really triggered right now. So how about we just start by building a bit of awareness of what the triggers are, notice what the reactivity is, and be kind to ourselves when we do that. Be kind to ourselves when our wounds get scratched, and set a boundary. Set a boundary that, hey, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm not going to interact with this. I'm going to have boundaries until I do the groundwork. Okay. Until I do the somatic experiencing. Now, a good way to handle your triggers, aside from actually building awareness, is to have a matching glimmer. So a glimmer is the opposite of a trigger. It's a short burst of vagal safety. Okay. And I'm sure you know what vagal safety is by now. It's a moment of hope, of peace, of positivity, of relief. And just like the trauma release needs to match the event, the trigger and the glimmer need to match as well. Okay, so I've given a bunch of different glimmers here. So your glimmer could be a specific place in your home, or maybe it's your home itself. A glimmer for me is the walking track near my house that I spoke about. It could be a certain relationship, like a comfort person, it could be a teddy bear. It could be a meditation. When I say biohack here, I think I meant to say like a certain kind of deep breathing that can help bring you back down. So I'm aware of the irony in that. Let's just pretend it's not there. Time in nature. It could be a gratitude, a prayer, poetry, making choices. Yes, that is a glimmer. Taking agency can be a glimmer. Now, how do you know which one is which? This is where you do your trigger mapping. Okay, so I've got this little map here, or table that can really help you. So the trigger, the resource, and the glimmer. So the trigger is broken down into a headline. So what is it that brings you into a stress response? And then the tangible is the concrete event behind it. So for example, the trigger is my husband took a decision without me. That's the tangible. And the headline Verbalizing the experience, the somatic experience, is I feel ignored and unseen. What's the resource that I need to be in control? Proper matching of the resource to the issue. So breath work wouldn't be useful if you feel like you want to be protected or you don't feel safe, right? So here, the issue is that I don't feel seen. I feel ignored. So the resource that I need to feel seen and heard is to take agency, feel like my voice is heard. So maybe then a glimmer could be making a decision like calling my closest friend to tell her about it so I can get some validation about how I feel and to assert myself and know, yes, I'm allowed to feel this way instead of gaslighting or belittling myself. Or I could decide, hey, you know what? I'm going to do something for me. I'm going to make a decision that my partner has nothing to do with. Not to say I'm getting back at him. That's not the reason why. It's I'm taking agency without other people being involved. I'm going to book a spa date for myself. I'm going to buy the jacket that I was eyeing for a while. That's an example. Another really good one is self-harm, because let's be real, it's a thing, and we're not going to be mean to ourselves. We're not going to berate ourselves. We're going to treat ourselves with kindness. This is just a wound that needs to heal, and we can address it in a healthier way. So the headline is I want to self-harm. What's the tangible? I had a fight with someone. What's the resource? What is it that you really need? I want an intensity. I want a feeling of intensity. I want an endorphin release. Okay, how can I get that intensity in a different way, in a healthier way, in a way that gives me what I want without the negativity and the consequences? One thing you can do is use temperature, like holding an ice cube in your hand and feeling the temperature change, or sprinting or weight training. Exercise can be really good as a glimmer. Okay. So I want you guys to make sure that you are mapping your triggers and take your time. And sometimes you might change what you think it is. And that's all part of the process of self-discovery. That's part of the process of getting in body and building resilience, building your toolkit, because you need a toolkit, right? This is one of them. And then as you start to interact with triggers over time, with good somatic experiencing on board, good regulation on board, and a few glimmers and other tools on board, you can interact in the world in a much healthier way. Okay, let's talk about a healing lifestyle. So I think these all go without saying, but I will still say them just in case you don't know. You can't heal in the same environment that hurt you. So please quit that damn job, leave that damn relationship, move out of that damn house, whatever it is that you need to do. It's very hard to heal when you are constantly surrounded by triggers. Now, these are some other things to help with your healing lifestyle. Food and caffeine. So we don't want to have caffeine on an empty stomach. Let's have caffeine with our breakfast and cut it off at around 11 a.m. and to have some balanced meals throughout the day, because we want to regulate our cortisol. We want to not be in an unnecessary fight-flight reaction, which is what can happen when you have caffeine on its own. And we want to make sure that we're nourishing ourselves with a lot of calories. Healing is a calorically expensive process. We don't want to be in a calorie deficit. We don't want to be skipping meals. And we need a lot of fat. We need healthy fat. Like remember when I was talking about myelination of a nerve, if you want to actually help develop and nourish your nerves, you need myelin, which is what made up of what? Fat. You need fat, specifically healthy fats. We want omega-3s. We don't want PUFAs. We don't want seed oils. We want fatty cuts of meat, fatty cuts of fish, wild caught fatty fish. We want nuts and seeds and avocado in every meal, ideally. Fat is really helpful here. A morning routine. So to help with your circadian rhythm, sleep and wake at the same time, have some me time in the sun every morning, spiritual time with your creator, switch off your notifications because they can be very triggering and activating, some light exercise. We do want to exercise. It's a good thing for us. We want to work. It's a good thing for us. We need activation or stimulation. It's not good to just be bored all the time and to be like in a spazzed out state, but too much is not good. Too little is not good either. We want just the right amount. Okay. And so when you're healing, you might notice that you can exercise, but at a much lower capacity. You can work, but not as many hours or not as intensely. And that's fine. I think it might be good for you to work part-time during this period of your life. And I also think it's important that you pick up hobbies that help relieve stress and promote relaxation and also help you express yourself. I think it can be such a healing thing to do, because when you're not working as much, when you're not training as much, when you're not socializing as much because you're tired, you need to fill that time with something else. And what are a lot of people going to do? They're going to fill that time with their phone. That's the worst thing you can do for yourself, man. You want to express yourself. And I think it's a good thing to pick up the hobbies that you've been telling yourself that you've been wanting to do for years. Now is the time to do it. And in fact, creativity and sensitivity go hand in hand. If you think about the best art, they come from who? Tortured artists, express your pain, express how you're feeling in a creative, artistic way. And don't tell me you're not creative, because everybody is. And don't tell me that you have no hobbies. You just haven't discovered them yet. Okay. So I would encourage that you have a very self-prioritized phase of your life, okay, full of connection with others, connection with yourself, connection with parts of yourself outside of just productivity and KPIs and corporatization and the industrialization of life. You are a lot more than that. You're a being, not just a doing, okay? And then when you do start healing, here is what to expect. You may be tired all the time. Sleep as much as you possibly can. Sleep is so regenerative. When you move into rest digest, when you get out of that freeze break, when you start to process all that fight flight energy and you start to get into rest digest, you'll notice how much you need. And so you may have spent years living in chronic stress and you didn't need much sleep and you were fine. And now suddenly you're exhausted. The tiniest thing just drains the crap out of you. That's normal. And you heal when you sleep. So literally when I was healing my nervous system for about a year, I was working part-time. I was exploring a lot of my hobbies. I was barely doing much exercise. And I was sleeping like 10 hours a night. I was getting deep sleep. That's the best thing you can do for nervous system plasticity, for healing organs and tissues and overcoming your chronic health issues. Damn, go ahead and sleep, girl. Go ahead and sleep. No energy to hang out with people. Understandable. Again, follow your body's impulses. On the days you feel like socializing, socialize. On the days you notice, hey, I'm isolating myself too much, maybe go ahead and hang out with your safe people, your inner circle. When you feel like, you know what, I just want to say no to this person who's invited me, say no. Have your boundaries. Apathy or anhedonia is completely understandable. It can be very overwhelming and you might feel like you just run out of all of your emotions. I think it's just so important that you continue to treat yourself with kindness and embrace every phase, every emotion as it comes. If anything, it's part of somatic experiencing in and of itself. Unmotivated to work or do anything, it's tiring to get in body. Somatic experiencing is a full-time job in and of itself. Understandable. More reliance on your support system and your anchors. Lean on them. They are there for a reason. This is a time to prioritize yourself. Do not feel guilty for it. And lastly, you may notice that you feel bored. And that's why you need to have hobbies. You need to have other ways to experience life outside of just the day-to-day responsibilities that you have cut back on. Healing happens in the silence. I think that really speaks for itself. All right, let's talk about supplements. Not to say that supplements are necessary. These are the 1%ers. If you've done everything else and then you feel like you want to go ahead and buy a really expensive supplement, go for it. I'd say that the ones that are worthwhile are either an adaptogen or a nootropic or both. So an adaptogen just helps you adapt to stress. It works on the HPA axis, which just helps you to regulate your cortisol levels and to help with building resilience to stress when you start getting back into the fullness of your day-to-day life. So I would probably start taking this after you've done a lot of work on your nervous system and after you feel like you've healed a lot and you've had a very low stress lifestyle for a bit and you're about to get back into things. That would be a good time to take an adaptogen if you want. It's not necessary. Just be mindful to cycle them. So you may have heard of something like ashwagandha. If you were to take it, which I wouldn't recommend, you would just need to make sure you cycle it. So ideally like 8 weeks on, 8 weeks off. The one I do like is the rhodiola. I love rhodiola because it doesn't have the same side effects as ashwagandha, specifically anhedonia, or just having no feeling at all. It's like this apathy where you don't feel any pleasure, but you also don't feel any pain. It's not good. So especially when you are experiencing everything in your body for the first time, you want to feel things, right? Rhodiola is not like that. I take it. I love it. So I recommend it. Although you probably want to do your own research, get a second opinion from a health practitioner. Nootropics are cognitive enhancers. They are great if you want to really reduce inflammation in the brain, if you want to improve your neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. It reduces oxidative stress, improves blood flow, it boosts neuroplasticity, which is rewiring the brain. I love them. I think everyone in this day and age should be taking nootropics. So some of them are like resveratrol. Resveratrol is goated. It's an antioxidant for the brain. And that just, by the way, if you are going to take this stuff, make sure that your diet is clean first. Because, you know, if your diet isn't clean and your brain's inflamed because of it, yes, resveratrol can help with fighting a bit of that inflammation, but it's not really going to get to the root cause. So these are, like I said, are the 1%ers after you've addressed everything else at the bottom of the pyramid. L-theanine increases your flow state. It helps get into deep relaxation. Cordyceps mushrooms, very neuroprotective, helps with energy and focus. Lion's mane is another popular one. It gives you this sharpness, clarity of mind, memory, learning. Bacopa monnieri, I also take this. Supports nervous system. It's an antioxidant. It's an all-rounder, really. Like, they're really, really good. Now, the one that I do recommend everyone take from now, I think is worth the money, is phosphatidylserine. It's remember how I keep talking about myelin and how myelin is like a fat that coats the nerves and helps with neural transduction? Phosphatidylserine is incredible for nourishing your nerves and helping improve the myelination of nerves. They're really good. It's also really good to help after you've had a panic attack. If you're experiencing a lot of anxiety, a lot of activation, it helps you calm back down. It's really, really good. I love it. I think it's probably the best supplement I've ever taken in my life. And I've taken a lot. So I'd probably say that's the only one that's worth the money and the investment. Okay, last point. The big names in trauma. Let me just quickly run through them. If you want to learn from others, if you want to know who to learn from, if you want to know who are the pioneers that I've learned from, these are the names that I would look at. So Peter Levine, he's the guy that developed somatic experiencing. I think he's in like his 70s or 80s now. Like I said, still alive. Stephen Porges, he discovered polyvagal theory, which we spoke about today, and he actually worked with Peter Levine. So they work closely together to develop a lot of the research in this space. Moshe Feldenkrais, he created the Feldenkrais method, and it's made up of two moving parts: awareness through movement, which is basically movement sequences, guided exercises that help you build that awareness, similar to the stuff that I was talking about with somatic practitioners. So somatic practitioners do the Feldenkrais method. So it helps you to improve your coordination, flexibility, really good for people who have sustained physical injuries and trauma. And then the second part of the Feldenkrais method is functional integration. So this is where the practitioner will use hands-on touch and gentle movement to guide clients through movement patterns, release muscular tension. So again, what I spoke about, or the example I spoke about with someone who has had sexual trauma, and certain positions and certain parts of their body are really, really disconnected, will cause a lot of activation, and it's very triggering. Functional integration is really good to help improve that. Irene Lyon, she's someone who combines it all. She's very big in the educational space. She's probably got the biggest online presence besides Gabor Mate. She has a course called Smart Body, Smart Mind if you want to work with somatic practitioners who are very well trained. Understandably, they are online. So if you want someone in person, I'm not entirely sure of any in Australia. I'm not sure of any federations where you can look them up, but I would say Irene Lyon, her website, would connect you with somatic practitioners, even if they're overseas, who would possibly know people in Australia. I know she works with a guy in Sydney, but if you're from Melbourne and you want someone in person, you might have to do a bit of research, but her website would be a good place to start. Gabor Mate, probably the most famous out of this list. He's on like every podcast. So like I said earlier, his work has been focused mainly on the connection between childhood trauma and addiction. And he's got heaps of books. He's a great voice in the space and someone that you can learn a lot from. Kathy Kane, she's an expert on somatic experiencing and touch therapy. She's actually Irene Lyon's mentor, and she has kind of continued to develop Peter Levine and the Feldenkrais method as well. And then finally, Bessel van der Kolk. He's the guy who wrote the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And he's very well known for the work he's done in PTSD, but from that somatic lens. So if you want to learn, these are guys or girls that you can learn from. You can also do an NIC ABM course. I've done a bunch of them. They're a psychology institute, and they do online courses. Personally, I think that they are very uni lecture like, very heavy on the jargon. If you're somebody who doesn't really get it, the scientific language, to be fair, I have a whole degree in physiology, and even I struggled at some points with the jargon. I wouldn't suggest doing it, but if you do want to get a bit more accreditation, if you're a coach yourself, or if you're just a big science nerd like me, you can definitely go ahead and do their courses online. But yeah, that is where you would move on to next if you want to learn more. Today has been very in-depth, as you can see by the time, and yet still very foundational. Like, there's so much that this world covers, so much that we can go into. I've really kept it at the need to knows. I've kept it at the high level physiological or physiology work that you need to understand and do. So if you want to take it a step further, this is where you do it. Anyway, thank you for your time. I hope you've learned a thing or two, many, I'm sure. My DMs are open if you have any questions, if you want to book me in for a consultation, or if you want to work with me, all the details are on my website. Otherwise, I bid you farewell, and I hope you are feeling a lot more connected to your body. Bye.